Please rise. The court of the FLP is now in session. The Honorable Judge Krim residing.
Members of the jury, you have been called here today to decide the guilt or innocence of the accused based on the information revealed during this case. Bailiff, what is today's case?
Your Honor, today's case is the People versus Lost.
Is the prosecution prepared to begin?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Prosecution, you may begin your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we are charging the showrunners of Lost with violations of the Canada Criminal Code, Section 420, Chapter 69, specifically willful misconduct and gross negligence, leading all followers of the television program to feel, as the title suggests, completely lost. We will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the show was left incomplete and ultimately a waste of time for all newcomers to the show. It is completely unreasonable to require 10 hours of research, reading through fan theories and Wikipedia pages just to partially understand what the showrunners were attempting to convey in that final season. Even the epilogue episode that was supposed to retcon the finale provided very little closure for the series. We'll have expert witness testimony from Marco Guarini and Karol and Marco, two individuals who were recently subjected to the torture of watching the series for the first time. At the conclusion of this trial, we ask that you find the defendants guilty, as the evidence is simply irrefutable. Thank you.
Thank you. The defense may begin their opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, thank you for being with us today to pass judgment on this divisive and thought-provoking subject. The defense acknowledges all that has been said thus far in the matter, and now humbly takes its own opportunity to speak up on the case. I'm here today to represent the defendant because I believe in standing up for those who have been wronged. I believe in standing between the falsely accused and those who are premature to condemn them. I believe in a reality where truth wins. Let me paint you all a picture and take you back to the early 2000s, specifically the landscape of network television in the early 2000s, when the most prestigious shows airing at the time were The Wire and The Sopranos, and sure, shows of this caliber have been praised for decades now, but at the time, they were few and far between. Skimming through the channels on the TV guide, you would often be met with reality shows, police procedurals, and corny family-centric sitcoms. So when Lost broke onto the scene in 2004 with an explosive premiere, a record-breaking $15 million pilot episode, and a premise that dragged in the masses, it insisted on rewriting the book on prestige television. The show featured a huge cast of unique characters, with their backstories and development being methodically revealed throughout the seasons by way of the series' signature structure, the use of flashbacks into a character's past, showing how their prior experiences are parallels to the conflicts they are facing in the present. Because of this being the main formula used in the structuring of the episodes, the viewers tuning in each week would be rewarded with not only the next piece of the overarching story, but also often a somewhat isolated tale focusing on one of the characters growing through introspection. This model worked so well that Lost quickly became among the top-rated shows of the era, bringing in on average 16 million viewers per episode in season 1, and holding on to an average of 10 million by its final season. The show was so successful that, as has always been the case, its network wanted more. But the creators of the show only planned to make Lost a 3-season story. The executives weren't about to waste a golden opportunity, so they forced the continuation of the show, even when the viewership began to decline and the plot started slipping, bringing the threat of cancellation. The showrunners were told the remainder of the allotted episodes will be split into what are now the final 3 seasons. And I'm sure the concept of network TV filler episodes is not novel. After all, even the best network shows that came after Lost experienced filler episodes, to some degree. It's par for the course when these projects are at the mercy of network suits. But it's interesting to note that Lost has come back into the public eye in recent years with the rise of streaming television. I think viewers nowadays are far more attuned and hungry for TV series with artistic focus than ever before. Lost was a show from an era when TV was, in general, cheap and crowd-pleasing. Fewer series dared to poise with such a bold premise right out the gate, committing to telling a character drama disguised as this mysterious desert island scenario. A show that was perhaps ahead of its time. Flawed as it may be at times, and I will not deny that it is heavily flawed, we're talking about a creative vision that spoke to people, with a memorable cast and a dense mythos. As crazy as the plot may have gotten as the story went on, it never lost focus on the core story of opening your mind to the unknown. And isn't that at the heart of the artistic experience? Opening ourselves up to what others have to say? Viewing the world from a different perspective for a change? Today, those artistic perspectives will be discussed and judged, like all genuine art should be, However, the true meaning of its existence is not only to be judged, but to serve as a window into the minds of those behind the art. Thank you, Your Honor. All right, thanks for indulging me in this skit, guys.
What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not
It sounds so
make this shit up.
stupid hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time. I was going to say, I have no other lines. I don't know where to go from here.
The skit
No,
is over.
that's it for the rehearsed part.
Ben Smithos.
So-
Damn.
That's one way of putting it.
So, welcome back to the FLP, and we've already had one episode in season 4, but for Karol and I, this is our first return, and we have brought a guest named Meguel, who has been mentioned on the show many times as a friend of the show. Say hi, Meguel.
Hello.
We have brought Meguel on because this is my selection episode for the show Lost, and like me, Meguel has a history with the show. So I can start with my history, and then we can cycle through your history / experience of watching the show, and then we can get to the itinerary of the discussion. So I chose Lost because I think it's in my top 3 shows that I've watched. I first watched it in 2014, so well after the show was on TV. I also don't think I would have enjoyed it at the age I was when it was on TV. So I watched the show entirely through binging, which should be noted because that alters the way that you receive the show, as we might discuss later. But I was hooked immediately. Now, I've seen it 2 more times since 2014, which is almost like going on 10 years since I've first seen the show now. I've grown a lot, and I have come to recognize the heavily flawed nature of the show. But I think I only like it more because of it. I respect the artistic integrity behind what they were trying to do, even if they didn't land, or even if they far from landed, I should say, the initial intent. But I love the succeeding in the strong character development of so many of these iconic characters that I have personally grown to love, and I have a list of my favorite characters and character dynamics that we can go through later. So that was the draw for me, was the ensemble cast of unique characters that they showed to us. So like I said, this is in my top 3 shows. I'm very passionate about it, but there is one person here who has a history that goes even far back with this show than I, and that is Meguel. So I guess I'll pass it on to him now.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so I first watched the show when it was on air for like the last season or 2. So this is like early high school, I think, or yeah, it must have been early high school. And yeah, it was at the time the most disappointing show I've ever watched. But then I don't know what happened late high school. I don't know if I convinced you to watch it, Dan, or if you just watched it on your own and then we started talking about it. I don't think I convinced you to watch it because I would never recommend that show. But we started watching it in 2014, 2015, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch it again because, like, you know, I remember the good parts. You know, so the flaws were kind of faded away at that point. And then I kind of watched it. I don't know if I watched it with you or maybe right after you watched it. I forget the timeline, but yeah, I went through it the second time, like around the same time you did. And man, I was crushed equally as hard when we got to that final season. You know, I was even talking about buying like the collector's edition. Like, oh, this show is sick. Like, I'm on like season 4. I'm like, this is like the best show ever. And then it was tough. Even with all the disappointments we've had over the years with shows like the Dexter finale and the Game of Thrones finale, Lost is still the number 1. Undisputed.
Number 1.
Worst ending to a show. Just of how hard it fell and how, like, yeah, it just left things in a terrible place, I feel like. And we can talk about, I have a lot of notes here, but we'll get to that later. So that's pretty much my history with the show. I agree with you about some of the highlights of the show. Like, the thing that drew me to it, why I loved it so much, was definitely the characters and the ensemble cast. Like, I don't think a show has since then hasn't had a collection of like characters that are so interesting and so I don't want to say like loved, but like emotionally connected to in some way. You know, like you hate, you know, Ben in some of those episodes. You love
in some of the episodes.
all these characters have like different flaws with them, but you still root for some of them. You hate others, but they're all like not perfect in any way. They're not always like the protagonist. So it changes between who's protagonist, antagonist, and it's like, yeah, it's very well done in that sense. Like even shows like Breaking Bad, you have a few characters that are developed in the depth that like a dozen characters are developed on Lost, for example. Like it's crazy how they managed to do that. I think it's like, I can't think of another show that has such a set of characters like that, where each one has their own episode and they go in depth on their backstory and that kind of thing, which is really, really cool. It's probably like my favorite part of the show, to be honest, and specific characters we'll talk about later, but I'm excited to get into the discussion and start talking about it, especially
Perfect.
now with two people who just watched it recently, because I haven't watched
They're
it
like
since.
boy.
fresh on this show.
Yeah, they're your first time.
I don't know who wants to go first, but
Maybe I'll go first because I finished it before Marco did.
Sure.
So technically my experience goes farther back than his.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I watched the show for this podcast and knew nothing about it going into it other than, people kind of love it or hate it. Obviously, I knew it was like a big phenomenon on TV. I remember seeing commercials and stuff, but obviously when it was coming out, we were pretty young and I was watching like One Tree Hill or some kind of bullshit like that. So Lost wasn't really calling to me. But yeah, so I watched it for this. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was really excited to get to the end simply because I've heard so much discussion about it, but I didn't really know what it was. I feel like, and in research, I've confirmed that I thought it was like they've been dead this whole time, this is a heaven or hell scenario kind of thing. So I was fearing that the whole time, and I guess it wasn't that the whole time being the caveat, but
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it at the beginning. Obviously, we'll get into specifics, but when I started watching it, it took me a while to get into it just because, like, long episodes, so many episodes per season, I was just, like, struggling to find the time to watch it back to back, enough to get into it and, like, to start caring about these people. But once I did, like, I was in it. Like, there was a time where I think I was watching, like, 5 episodes a day, which, like, is not that big of a deal, but like when you have a life like that, and these are 45-minute long episodes, like that's a lot of time. So I eventually
4 hours,
was really into it and really enjoying it and really invested in the characters. And even now, just like for context, I finished it in maybe November and we're recording this beginning of February, so it's been a few months. Like thinking back on my experience watching it, I'm already kind of like nostalgic for it. Like I miss watching it for the first time and getting to know these people. But I definitely, like, forget the ending. Like, my brain is already erased, like, the last couple
Yeah.
seasons. Just because, like, all the parts that I loved about it kind of stopped. Or just, like, everything stopped making sense. And I was just, like, frustrated. And even doing the research, like, right before this call, I, like, forgot some of the ending already in the last couple months. And I was like, wait, this is how we ended these things? I don't know. It was a wild ride. I had a great time. I laughed, I cried, I binged the show, I took weeks off at a time. It was all over the place. It felt like it took years. It felt like it took seconds. I don't know. I think this show kind of broke me, but I also had a great time. And that was my experience.
That's a fantastic transition, Carol, because I don't think I've ever had a harder time understanding my own feelings about a TV show than I have with Lost. There are so many ways we can go, so I'm just going to try to be general. We obviously started watching around the same time when we found out that we would be doing this on the podcast. So I forget when we made that judgment call. I just finished it, but I also watched like half the show in the span of a week. But so yeah, I just finished it. Like, here's the thing. Everyone, it kind of describes Lost as like there's the 3 good seasons, and then there's like the transitional season, which has good stuff, but is like a whatever the word is. I can't think of the word. Whatever.
Oh, Harbinger? Harbinger?
Yes, yeah, now you can't think of it either. Harbinger of things
I just don't know how to
come.
say it, but I see it in my head.
Me too. So it's like there's the transitional season, then there's season 4, that's that word, and then there's seasons 5 and 6, which are maybe some of the worst television ever. But it's awful, and we can talk about it. But like, so that's like what everyone said. And then watching it, I think the thing that I struggled with the most, the 2 things I struggled with the most, the first 3 seasons, in particular, as we move through time and as we get more and more prestige television. Like, at the time, for sure, I agree, like, the format of it would feel very prestige. But then, like, coming into now, where we have nothing but prestige television, and watching a 24-episode show where half the episodes in each season are about... It's like the format that we love, but it's about characters where I'm like, can we just get a Jack episode or a John episode or a Saeed episode? You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. Like, how many times do I need to see Kate almost get arrested, but then, like, right at the last second, she didn't... You know what I mean? Like,
Are you not invested in Boone and Shannon's love?
No, don't even get me started
that's
on Boone.
crazy.
That was just fucking weird. That was, like... I almost stopped watching. Like, I
Okay,
was
also,
like...
hot take that you wanted to hear less about Kate. She's, like, one of the main people. You could
Yeah,
have
I
complained about
disagree with that
literally
one.
anyone else.
Nope, I hate Kate. I think Kate is one of the weaker... I think Kate is literally the worst female character on the show. I like every other female character more than I like Kate.
Interesting.
Even
wow, I
Shannon?
think about that.
Yeah, that's a hot take. Wait, Anna Lucia?
Yeah, and I hate her, but...
What?
No, but let me explain something. Let me explain one thing that I'm trying to get at. Not necessarily the present day stuff with Kate, but the flashback stuff. I felt like her flashback stuff was super repetitive to me, and it offered very little. Like, anytime it was a Kate episode, sure, like, whatever she was going through in the present day, I was cool with. Before those first 3 seasons when we had flashbacks, at a certain point I was like, yeah, I got it. I don't think we're adding much to this the way that other characters who I like more, like Locke or Saeed, for example, it felt like every time we had a flashback with them, it was really unique and really played up like a different aspect of them. Whereas with Kate, it was always the same. But we're getting very hyper specific. Just to keep it general. So yeah, in general, all I'm getting at is I think I struggled with even the separation of like the first 3 seasons are so prestige and great because of the fact that in 2024, it still feels like like half of it still feels like a network TV show, even in those first 3 seasons, because there are filler characters and etc. That being said, and I said this to Dan, you know, the version of Lost that's a 4 season, 10 episodes per season TV show that's just focusing on like the key characters we love, that's on like HBO, that version of Lost I would be there for. And anytime we get that in the first 3 seasons, I was very much there for it, like with the characters that I loved and stuff. But yeah, I feel like those first 3 seasons are really plagued by some of that network TV stuff, and then it goes to shit. And season 4, ironically, even though it's like the writer's strike season, I think because it was so condensed, worked for me a little bit better, because I didn't find a lot of those... We weren't like having entire episodes focused around things I didn't give a shit about, because it was so like condensed and like we just need to get to the next thing, which felt more modern in its pacing. So yeah, so like in general, I think just very conflicting. I still don't really know my opinions on it, because there was stuff that I was so hyped for, and I would like talk with Dan about it and be like, this was great, or this was so cool, and then fucking immediately I would be like, do I have to watch the show for the podcast still? Am I seriously watching it? It was just the most up and down sine wave experience I've ever had with a TV show in my life. And I think just the last thing I'll say before we move into general discussion is also, and I brought this up on our 2-part episode of Vanderpump, and obviously this whole season we're going to be talking about, well, the plan is to be talking about TV shows. I feel like a key thing that exists with TV shows that doesn't necessarily exist with films is the bingeability, and is the like sadness if you can't get to the next episode right away. Like, you want to keep watching and keep having that next episode, and that's such a big metric for me personally by which I judge my TV experiences. Part of the frustrating thing with Lost for me was like, exactly like Carol said, it would be like a 2-week span where I couldn't put it down, and then it would be like a month where I watched 1 episode, because it was just like, I don't want to deal with what's going on in the show right now. And I've never had that happen with a TV show. So just mark me as conflicted for this whole show. The good stuff is great, and it is pioneering, and it's awesome. But there is other stuff in there where I'm like, get this shit out of this TV show that I really like. And I just wish they held off making it for like 15 years, and then we got the version of it that would be made in modern times, because that would be a top 3 TV show for me. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
2 points before we move on of stuff that you mentioned. It's funny that you talked about the Kate thing. Some of you might know this already, but the original plan, Marco, you're gonna love this if you don't know this already.
Okay, I don't.
You're gonna hate it, but like it's gonna be a fun fact. The original plan was to have Michael Keaton be Jack, and
I love that.
kill him off in the first episode, and have Kate be like the main character leader.
Okay.
So it's a fun fact about Lost that I wanted to bring up. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the bingeability thing, I think you're totally right. Like, for example, in season 1, there's that section of the season where Claire disappears for like 10 episodes, right? She's kidnapped. I don't know if it's 10, but it's something like that.
Was that the first season?
Waiting week to week. Pardon?
Was that the first season? I feel like I
Yeah.
cannot keep straight like what happened to when, because just so much
well, it's
happened
when she was
at all
pregnant.
times.
She disappears again later in like season 5.
Yeah, no, of course.
So, yeah.
Yeah, when she's pregnant and she gets kidnapped. And like just imagining waiting months to get the next plot point of that happening, as opposed to if you're binging it, you might get it in the next session of when you're binging it, for example. Like, the ideal version of the show would be the bingeable streaming version. So it is unfortunate. But the next thing I want to do, this is an ensemble show. There's a lot of characters, a lot of significant characters too. I wrote a little glossary of the most important ones with just a little description for each character. So I'm just going to go through that now.
How many characters did you pick? Because I have a sticky note with like everyone's name, and like the sticky note is like full. Like, oh god, you won't even be able to see it because of my background. There's like too many people. How many people are on your glossary?
Yeah, I have okay,
The
so I have
Oceanic
Jack,
6
Kate.
or 8 or however fucking many people there were.
Well, those, but also more. Jack, Kate, Locke, Sawyer, Saeed, Sun and Jin, Claire, Charlie, Hurley, Michael, Desmond, and Ben.
No,
Okay.
Mr. Echo.
And Juliet.
Okay.
I have a little blurb about all the tail section
No
passengers
Rose and
all
Bernard.
the expedition team members. So, to kick it off, Jack Shepard, a spinal surgeon struggling to live up to his family legacy. His father, Christian, was a surgeon as well, and Jack worked under him, having to strive for his approval his whole life. This self-destruction infected Jack's later relationships as his marriage to a former patient of his fell apart. His failure to prove his worth to his drunken father haunted him to no end. When his father had suddenly turned up dead in Sydney, Australia, after being missing on a bender, Jack took it upon himself to go and retrieve the body and bring it back to Los Angeles, with the eventual funeral providing him a chance to finally seal away their troublesome relationship. Upon crashing on the mysterious island on the way home, Jack quickly fell into a leadership role with the surviving group as they all looked to him for medical attention and guidance. Kate Austin, a drifter from Canada who grew up in an abusive household. Her stepfather figure was a deplorable human being and a drunk who always needed cleaning up after and sometimes even tried to force himself onto Kate. One day, Kate decided to free herself and her mother from his grasp, so she killed him and went on the run. Traveling cross-country, trying to connect with their mother after the incident to make amends, she eventually found herself in Sydney, where she was discovered, arrested, and promptly put on a flight back to LA with her accompanying officer. Upon crashing on the island, she began hoping for a fresh start, as it seemed she had finally found a way to disappear. But since she had long been misunderstood for her crimes and had long lacked a warm family setting, she wanted the chance to do something for the newfound community of survivors on the island, constantly offering to help Jack lead the group in their survival. John Locke, a box factory salesman, department store clerk, commune resident, and more throughout the years. John's mother would tell him that he was special, but the absence of a father in his life would seem to tell him otherwise. It wasn't until decades into his life that he first met his father, but once he entered his life, he didn't want him to leave again. That is, until he found out that the only reason he sought him out was because he was dying and needed one of John's kidneys. John initially viewed the request as an opportunity for a spiritual father-son bonding experience with the chance to lead into a lifelong relationship, but sadly, when John woke up from the surgery, he found that he had been abandoned once more. He then went after his father and confronted him, but John was only rewarded by him pushing him out of an 8-story high window, losing his ability to walk. Years later, when he had had enough with life as it was, John traveled to Sydney for a wilderness retreat, but he was told he would not be able to participate in his paraplegic state. When the flight home crashed, he discovered that the island had returned to him his ability to walk. Sawyer, aka James Ford.
Are you okay, Carol?
What?
No, that
I'm
comedic bit
crying
about him
because I'm
getting pushed out of a
laughing
window
so
is so
That's what happens.
No, I just want to
Look,
say.
John just couldn't catch a break, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say John's life is like almost hilariously tragic.
Yeah.
But I also hate him so much.
See, I don't.
You hate him?
You think I'm crazy for hating
He's my
Kate,
least
but
favorite character.
He's
Well, second
literally
least.
Wow.
the best character on the show. Anyway,
Oh,
continue.
man.
that's
Just, like,
not
The
even-
scene of him being
He's out of my
pushed
top
out a
five.
window makes me
guys are
fucking
crazy.
cackle. Who pushes someone out of a window? Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, it is funny.
Continue.
Okay. Sawyer, aka James Ford. A con artist trying to find the man who conned his parents out of all their money by seducing his mother, causing his father to commit murder-suicide, killing her and himself. James took on the name of the con man, Sawyer, as his own nickname, and adopted this line of work to make his way in the world, striving never to break a family apart for a score. When he got a lead that the man indirectly responsible for his parents' deaths was in Sydney, he traveled there to kill him, but the lead was bad, and he killed the wrong person. When his plane home crashed, he shared Kate's sentiment that the island would be a good chance to hide away and remove himself from society. Saeed Jarrah, a former interrogation officer for the Iraqi Republican Guard. He spent years torturing people for his country until a past love of his, Nadia, was brought in for interrogation for being a freedom fighter. Burdened by the blood on his hands and out of the love he still had for her, Saeed decided to risk his career and help her escape the military compound, and was discharged. Years later, he was approached by the American government to help infiltrate a terrorist cell headed by an old acquaintance of his, in exchange for the location of Nadia, who had been relocated under a different identity. The cell was based in Sydney, so Saeed traveled there to try to persuade them away from their plans to set off a truck bomb. Saeed succeeded, but his friend didn't survive. He boarded the plane back to LA to prepare for his friend's funeral, but crashed on the island. There he struggled with his past, as his field expertise was called upon by the other survivors. Sun and Jin Kwon, a couple from Seoul, South Korea, the daughter of a rich company president and her husband who worked for him. Sun and Jin were once madly in love, but had grown apart over the years after Jin started working for Sun's father and discovered the shady business of what he does. The true nature of the job was that of a mob enforcer, facilitating business relations for the company, often in a bloody manner. Sun, devastated by how cold Jin had become to her, began cheating on him with her English instructor, with whom Jin was also unaware she was meeting. They found themselves on the flight because they were asked to personally deliver an item from Sun's father to an associate in Sydney. After the crash, Jin learned of Sun's affair and her ability to speak English, and began down a path of trying to be a better companion, while Sun learned to step out of the controlling grasp that her marriage once had on her. Claire Littleton and Aaron, a former tattoo artist living with the guilt of her mother's experience raising her. When Claire was younger, she and her mother had gotten into a car accident due to her arguing with her mother while driving. Her mother was left in a coma, and since then, Claire had been frightened by the responsibility of raising a child because of how hard she had made it for her mother to raise her. When she discovered she had gotten pregnant with her boyfriend, she decided it was time to give having a family a try. But her boyfriend, scared by the responsibility himself, abandoned Claire and the baby before it was born. Having doubts about going through with the pregnancy, Claire sought out a couple to adopt the baby after it would be born, and she found a couple she was happy with, but they lived in Los Angeles. Wanting to be sure she was doing the right thing, she was convinced by a friend to visit a psychic. Expecting not to take the reading seriously, she was surprised when the psychic warned her not to take the flight she had booked if she wanted the baby to live. Ignoring the warning, she boarded the flight to LA and crashed on the island, where her baby's delivery added a whole new layer of stress and uncertainty in their survival. Charlie Pace, a guitarist and vocalist with a history of drug abuse. Charlie and his brother Liam were members of the one-hit wonder rock band Drive Shaft. As is common in the lives of rock stars, they found themselves partaking in hard drugs recreationally, leading to Charlie's addiction to heroin. The band's reputation fell apart as a result. The members disbanded, and Charlie and Liam became estranged. Years later, Charlie flew to Sydney, where Liam was living, to reconnect with him and to try and reunite the band, but found that Liam had moved on, cleaned up his act, and started a family. This only made Charlie jealous and spiral even harder into his addiction. Having crashed on the island on the way home, he quickly came to realize his withdrawals were going to make the experience of being stranded much worse. Hurley, aka Hugo Reyes, winner of a multi-million-dollar lottery with a terrible curse. Hugo was working at a fast food chain when he found out he had won the lottery. He quit his job and began spoiling himself and his mother with gifts. But he started noticing increasingly bad things happening to him and the people around him ever since winning the money. The house he bought for his mother caught fire, and she had broken her ankle. A balcony he was on with a bunch of other people had collapsed, and a meteor crashed directly into the restaurant where he used to work. He decided to investigate the numbers he used to win the money, so he went to the person he had gotten them from. This person happened to have been a patient in a mental hospital, because Hugo himself used to be as well. His friend had been repeating the numbers frequently when Hugo had been a patient there. When he visited him to ask about the suspicious numbers, his friend told him he heard about them from someone he ran into years ago in Sydney. So Hugo traveled there to investigate further, tracked the person down, and was told that the numbers are cursed. Unsure of whether or not to believe the suspicion, he got on the plane back to LA. When the plane crashed, he tried his best to start helping others to redeem himself of the tragedies that had affected the people around him since his big win. Michael Dawson and Walt, a divorced construction worker and his son, struggling to have a proper relationship. Michael lost custody of his son Walt in his divorce, but after Walt's mother died, Michael regained custody. Having not seen Walt since he was a baby, Michael was left unsure about how to be a father figure that Walt needed. He picked him up in Sydney where he lived, and when their plane crashed on the flight home, Michael was faced with the responsibility of looking after a son he barely knew while navigating the traumatic event of being stranded. Uncertain of how they would survive, and with Walt continually doubting his father and defying his judgment, Michael was worried he would lose his trust completely and fail to get him home safely. Desmond Hume, a former soldier, monk, and sailboat captain, eternally looked down upon by the father of the woman he loves. Desmond and his girlfriend Penny loved each other dearly, but Penny's father, Charles Widmore, had always refused to give his blessing to Desmond to be with her because of his social class. Determined to prove to Charles that he is worthy of loving Penny by making a name for himself, he set out to make the accomplishment of sailing around the world. But his boat crashed on the island years before the plane crash. Marooned on the island, he vowed that he would one day find his way back home to be with Penny again. Benjamin Linus, the leader of a group of hostile inhabitants on the island, following orders from a stranger, initially pretending to be the survivor of a hot air balloon crash taken in by the plane crash survivors. Ben Linus was eventually revealed to be the leader of the Others, a group of people who had been terrorizing the survivors since they arrived on the island. Claiming to take orders from an elusive deity named Jacob, he insisted that all of the violence has had a greater purpose. Juliet Burke, a maternity doctor who was brought to the island to save her sister's life. Juliet was living on the mainland with a sister who had cancer when she was approached by a mysterious organization who offered to cure her sister with cutting-edge medical attention if Juliet agreed to move to the island permanently. She was told that she would help solve issues in the gestation periods of pregnant women on a team that was living and working in this remote location. Unable to turn down the chance to save her sister, she reluctantly agreed and found herself inducted into the group led by Benjamin Linus. The tail section passengers. The plane crash survivors from the tail section of the plane which crashed on the other side of the island. Ana Lucia Cortez, Libby Smith, and Mr. Echo were among the passengers in this group, who were forced to survive similarly to the other group, but with far less resources. The two groups did not come into contact until almost 50 days after the crash. And finally, the expedition team members, a team of scientists sent to find the island. Daniel Faraday, Charlotte Lewis, Miles Strom, Naomi Dorrit, and Frank Lapidus were sent by Charles Widmore to locate the site of the crash, but found themselves stuck there as well after their boat was destroyed. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me, guys.
What, no character bios for Jacob or the Man in Black? Everyone's two favorite characters?
Or the
AKA
guy
Cain and Abel?
with the
Yeah, Cain and
eyeliner.
Abel.
I was going to, but I didn't really know how much I could write about them. They're just kind of...
Just
They are the
refer
worst
them to the
part of
Old
the
Testament of the Bible and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so that's my little character glossary. Those are, like, Marco, you were talking about in your summary, like, there's the filler characters and the non-filler characters. I think those are the ones that I would consider the non-filler characters. The other ones I didn't mention were, like, Boone and Shannon and Rose and Bernard, although the one Rose and Bernard episode that we do get, I like a
Me
lot,
too.
where she finds out that she has cancer and then the island is the only thing keeping her alive, so she never wants to leave, and convinces Bernard to just stay there and live with her for the rest of their lives. That's nice.
They had such a cute little house. They
Yeah.
just wanted to be left alone.
They
I
also
loved
do
them.
become
They
hilarious.
were nothing, but
They become hilarious comedic relief in like season 6 because there's
Yeah.
like one episode where they show up to their house and their reaction is like, "You guys are still fucking doing random ass shit on this island. Like, what is it? First we saw you and like yeah, it's crazy."
I have a couple questions that I want to bring out to you guys, but before we get into that, is there any points that like anyone wants to jump into specifically? Like, I know some of you also made notes, so like we can acknowledge those too if you guys want.
I just wanted to bring up something actually that I learned about Mr. Echo. Apparently, the actor's parents passed away in like during season 2, and that's why they wrote him off in season 3.
Oh
is
my
because
God.
he
Oh, really?
asked to be written off because he's like, I'm dealing with this, he was supposed to be a much larger part of the show apparently. Like I was reading some theories about it, and apparently there was supposed to be like a conflict. Like they were building up this conflict between him and John Locke in season 2 or something, or season 3, I forget when. And it was supposed to eventually like represent the conflict between Jacob and the Man in Black, but like in present day kind of thing.
Makes sense though, because he departs very quickly. Right as he was like becoming one of my favorites, I was like, God damn it, they killed him.
The only reason I didn't give Mr. Echo his own description was because then I would have had to do it for all the tail section passengers, and anyway.
Here's what I'm gonna say about Echo. As I was starting the show, you and Meguel were like, Mr. Echo, best character on the show. Just wait. And then I got to Mr. Echo and I was like, yeah, he's sick. And then he just died. He just died.
Yeah.
And I was so sad because the way you guys talked about him, I was like, nice, another character to latch onto to make up for filler. And then he just wasn't there anymore. And I got very upset. So, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't know about that, the real life reason why he was written off. That's really sad, because there were characters from season 1 that had gotten less episodes than Mr. Echo did in his short time. They were obviously like meaning for him to be one of the heavy hitters in terms of his character development. He got, I think, 3 episodes in the time that he was on the show. So
he was on that redemption arc, and it was just like, it was an awesome story to follow, and then just so abrupt. I mean, the way they wrote it is it makes sense, kind of. Like, he was trying to manipulate Mr. Echo. The Man in Black was trying to manipulate Mr. Echo through his brother, but then once he refused believing that it was actually his brother, the Man in Black had like no use for him because he couldn't manipulate him, and so that's why he killed him. Like, that's the explanation, but it was so abrupt, and I don't think that was. I mean, obviously it wasn't their plan if he has to be written off. I don't know. Some people are saying that otherwise, like, we wouldn't have gotten the John Locke Jack,
which I hated. Though.
Kind of.
I
battle.
hated that dynamic. That's what made me hate John Locke.
Well, yeah, but people are saying that dynamic was probably going to be stronger than Mr. Echo, John Locke.
So here's something I guess we can talk about right now, because since we're talking about it. I think, as we all talked about, that one of the strengths of the show earlier was the ensemble cast. Because that's not something that you see a lot, and the fact that the show didn't really have a true protagonist during the first couple seasons. I mean, obviously there were characters we cared about more or less, but at any given moment, any character was as important as anyone else. They just all had their own unique stuff. Was cool and was like a unique thing to Lost. In general, we've talked about hating the like characters becoming important because they have to be important type trope. And it's because the show leans into the fantasy stuff, which we'll also talk about. Like, when the show was more sci-fi, it was significantly better. All the Dharma Initiative stuff. Like, everything to do with the Dharma Initiative and all that is so much better. But then once the show leans into the, like, fantasy, Cain and Abel bullshit, and, like, in doing that, it really started to focus in on certain characters, in particular, like, the dynamic between Locke and John, and even the fact that the final episode has like this ridiculous brawl, like Anakin Obi-Wan fight on the side of a cliff or whatever, like it's so like, to me,
so ridiculous. It's
so antithetical to like what everybody liked about Lost. Like the fact that it was just narrowed down into these two guys punching each other. One of them's not even it's just the Man in Black. It's not even John Locke, which is in and of itself so fucking annoying. But like, yeah, I thought that was, I think, one of the ways in which the show lost its footing, when it stopped being about the ensemble and became about like a couple characters' destiny, and we just kind of followed that through to the end.
Yeah, it became very religious in that last season or two, and that was man.
Yeah, I really hate
I don't care. Like, Mr. Echo was like the most religious character on the show, and that wasn't. I don't have a problem with that, but like, man.
You mean like it became very like just parallels of Bible stories?
Yeah, that's the like. It all just became a Bible story in the end. I don't know.
I think like the difference is, like, back in season 2 when you introduce Mr. Echo, there's like all these questions about, is there something weird going on the island? You know what I mean? Or is it all in our heads and stuff like that? And so to have like this religious figure and have his backstory sort of parallel that, and him becoming a priest and all that stuff, like, that works. But I think that only works if, as we build to an explanation on the island, the explanation on the island is a bit more like literal and is more, again, like science based. The fact that it then leads so far into just straight up like magic and stuff is just really fucking weird. Like, it doesn't really make sense with like the vibe of what the show was trying to do at all.
But it's also tough because as soon as you start getting into conversations between like basic like good versus evil, I feel like a lot of people are immediately gonna go to like God and the devil, so now it must be about like a literal human that represents all of goodness and a literal human that represents like the heart of evil, and then they must battle it out. And also people are going to be wearing crosses I don't know, like it was just so bizarre and not my favorite part. And like also like the fact that the heart of the island was like this shining bright white light was also
yellow.
It was ridiculous. But and I think that's the thing, is like ultimately what was cool about the premise of Lost is that you have this island which is very much like a person versus nature subplot of just like trying to survive on a desert island is in and of itself, there's so many problems and like things that you could play with. And then, you know, you have the more complicated character-based dynamics in the flashbacks, and like that's interesting. But I felt like they just like went way too hard on trying to come up with problems for them to face on the island that were all rooted in like magic and time travel. And I'm like, man, like I don't know, I'll be honest with you, if I was on a plane that crashed on an island, like I think there would be enough story to tell there without needing literal like
if it just
magic.
Stopped at like the Dharma Initiative people trying to exploit the island, and then the other people, like I feel like that's even a step further than they needed to, because yes, being deserted on an island in and of itself is a whole thing. But like that's another step that they could have done. But then it didn't need to be a whole battle for good and evil on the entire world.
Totally
like
agree.
That one step was just one step too far.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also don't think it was always like, Carol, you talked about how it seemed inevitable to come down to this battle between good and evil, but I don't know, I'd argue that it didn't really have to go there at all, because back in the earlier seasons, my favorite part about the show, and my favorite part about all of the seasons, even when they tackled this in the last season of Jack versus Locke, it didn't pit one of them as an evil, wrongdoing person. It was just a philosophical debate. So I would have loved to have seen it go down that path more so than just, we're at the end of all things, you're either good or you're like, you have malintent, which is what that final battle ended up being. But
the final battle wasn't even that, though. Like, we never got that final battle between the real Locke and Jack. It never happened.
Because it's
it was Jack versus the Man in Black posing as Locke.
So it was pretty much worse. Good versus evil in the end, which sucks. Because
that's what I mean.
I agree. I agree with you, Dan. I don't think the Jack versus John stuff was like terrible, but it never was wrapped up. Like, he was killed by Ben randomly, which we can talk about that. That's probably the worst. It was worse than, like, it was more abrupt than Mr. Echo's death, I feel like. And I felt like they were going to bring him back. I just do not think he should have died. I mean, I understand, like that seems like something that had to happen for the Man in Black to do what he did in season 6. Like, it didn't feel like it was a natural progression of John Locke's character, because, like, man, that his whole character arc is so unsatisfying, because he never fulfilled his destiny or whatever he was trying to do the whole show.
And I feel like it's not even like for the Man in Black, but specifically like we find out he's dead. We see the coffin reveal, I think, in season 4. And really, killing John Locke is really like them writing themselves into a corner of how can we possibly convince these people to go back to the island to have more of this show. Because at that point, the Oceanic Six have escaped. And I think, like, John Locke's death, Ben showing up and being like, he's dead, and he died because he believed that, like, you guys were supposed to be there and had so much more to do. Like, it's really, like, one of the only things they can pull to make that narrative jump to get everyone to try to go back. But that fucking sucks, like, to your point, Miguel, because I think the way more interesting thing would have been just keep them all on the island, and ultimately, whatever... To your point, Dan, I think, like, when they're on the island and they're trying to figure stuff out, having these two different characters that have two different approaches and people that, like, follow them for those reasons is totally fine. Like, that makes perfect sense because, again, it's not good versus evil. It's just, like, this is my thing, that's your thing. But, like, that needs to be, again, as everything you guys have said, that needs to be resolved, and then we see the resolution of that in terms of, like, who survives, who leaves. To have him die... At that point, kind of like, we don't even know Ben's done it when we reveal that he's dead, and then we build up to the fact that it was Ben that killed him. And before Ben killed him, he was trying to fucking kill himself, which is, like, also just so depressing. Like, it never ceases to be the most depressing thing with John Locke in a way that gets so ridiculous and is
Well, that's why I was like, it's kind of on brand for just the path of his life for him to die in this way.
But I think agreed, but also like I wish that would have played out in a way where it's like maybe like so he never gets to escape the island because he thinks he's special and he thinks there's something going on, and then like in this idealized version of the show that leads to his death on the island or something like that. Sure, but to have it be like as played out as it was, and like him go through this whole magical process to escape, and then like everything goes wrong, and then he tries to kill himself, and then Ben kills him, and then that's the catalyst for him going back, and they have to bring the body back so that way the Man in Black can impersonate him, which also is not a rule. I don't like that rule is like so hard and fast and fucking stupid and doesn't make any sense. It just gets to a level of like stupidity with all of it that doesn't. It stops trying to like fulfill character needs, and it's very much just how can we keep the wheel of plot spinning? Like how can we keep having more plot things going on?
That's a great point. I feel like there's a lot of rules that they've broken because like the Man in Black like was dead people very often, but not always, because like wasn't he impersonating like Walt sometimes?
Yeah.
That kid was alive. Like, we don't know where he was half the time, but he was alive.
Yeah.
He impersonated Walt to convince John to do some stuff.
Yeah.
Didn't he also impersonate a horse?
Was he a horse?
Wasn't he? Isn't there like...
Oh, yeah.
There could be a dead horse somewhere on the island. You don't know.
But it was...
Wait, are you trying to say he was the polar bear, too?
No, the polar bear was real.
Guys, the polar bear is real, yeah. But the horse...
Let's not go too far.
Let's not get silly here.
Okay, hold on.
The man
Before we derail here, here's my argument for the Locke thing.
Okay.
Yes, it's dumb that Locke's part in the show boils down in the season 5 and 6 to just being not actually Locke, the Man in Black. I don't like that either, but his death made total sense to me because like the whole Jack and Locke feud ending with John being a martyr for his cause and ultimately being what makes Jack decide to change his way of thinking, return to the island and die for the island. That's all because of finding Locke dead and realizing he was right this entire time. And listen, the show is wild. And there's like, especially when you look in the details, like there's so much shit that was just so out of nowhere. Like I hate that there's no rules for what the Man in Black can take the shape of, or there's no rules when we come to the time travel season, like what time travels with you. Objects can time travel with you, I guess. The environment. I hate all that stuff.
What causes time travel?
What causes
Also,
the time travel?
it was-
Why do you spin a pirate ship wheel in a cave to make the island travel in time?
Why does setting off a
What
nuke send you back in time? Who knows?
No, it sent them forward exactly at the moment
to where they left off?
to where they left off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's also one of my biggest gripes with the entire show.
Yeah,
but
that
one thing
was dumb.
one thing I loved throughout all 6 seasons was the resolution of Jack versus John Locke personally.
Here's my, not rebuttal, that's a strong term. Here's my building off of your
Argument?
thoughts. Yeah, and not even argument, that's a strong term as well.
This is a court case after all.
This is a court
Let's
case.
not forget.
Your Honor, this is my rebuttal.
You're the bailiff, but I'll let you talk.
Yeah, you take a stand.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I agree with you in so much as like, because John and Jack are so opposed to each other that his death being a catalyst for Jack's actions and all that makes perfect sense as a resolution. To me, it's the problem that like there's still half the show that happens after that. Like it's more that I want that to be I want to build up to that and have that be the season finale. Like the last 5 episodes of the show is whatever the plot is, I don't fucking care. But basically that like John has to die and then Jack has to like deal with that and whatever. Like that's fine as a character structure thing for sure. But to have that happen so early on and then to be like, oh, but people really like John Locke, so let's just bring him back as a ghost and stuff. And like all of that is where it really starts to, again, like spin the wheels. And it's almost like the show had its climax and then it's like, now we're gonna have 2 seasons of just a denouement, you know, just 2 seasons of fucking nothing, like filler to explain stuff when the central thing that we're all there for, which is how are these people going to survive and all of that stuff. I mean, you even see it with the flashbacks. There's a reason the flashbacks stop after season 3, and it's because we've explored all that we can explore about these characters. Like, that's such a natural stopping point, and if you had maybe one last season after season 3, just finish up the John and Jack stuff, and yeah, kill John. Like, I have no problem with him dying to serve a greater purpose, but it's just like, in the current version of the show, the purpose that it serves is the worst 2 seasons, and so that is, I think, the bigger, more frustrating element of it.
If we were in a world where like network suits weren't in control of everything and they had just condensed all of this into like the best 3-4 seasons, I think it would have been the idealized version of this tale that they're trying to tell,
Yeah.
where, like you said, the climax of the final season would be John making that sacrifice, Jack learning the lesson, possibly still making the sacrifice that he does.
Yeah.
But
Okay, one thing I don't really understand with the show is that for the first like 3-4 seasons, it's being built up as like the first season or two is like, oh, how do we survive, whatever, you know, how do we deal with the natives, how do we deal with what we found with the Dharma Initiative, all that, and that was really cool. But then it's like they start teasing like the bigger kind of plot point, which is like who's going to be the new protector of the island, because that's ultimately what they're all there for, right? Like Jacob hand chose all these people, and it's like, okay,
only a few of them. The other ones were just unlucky to be on the plane.
Unlucky.
By the way.
oh, is that what it was? I feel like
Really?
most of
There
the,
was a lot
like,
of people on the cave wall.
No, I mean like
The main cast.
they were the main cast. The people who
Everyone
were
who survived,
survivors
yeah.
that we never
Yeah.
Oh,
their
yeah.
name did not need to be
Yeah.
there.
But I'm talking about like, you know, like Oceanic 6 and like maybe a few others
For sure.
that were like chosen to, you know, potentially be the new protector. And that's like where the last couple seasons could have gone, is like this battle between different philosophies on how to lead people, how to take care of the island, how to deal with Men in Black or something. But instead, I don't know, we got something completely different. I don't even really know what's the message, like don't regret your time on the island because it was the best time of your life. Like that's like the ending. I really don't understand what the message was.
Well, the message was to have faith in things you don't see necessarily. But
And
I
to
agree with
value
you that
your
it's like,
friendships.
That seems like what it was. Like they all group up in the thing and they're like, oh,
well, you saw their
they were
lives before they were miserable.
well, yeah, I
Which
mean,
is
not that you don't make a good point, but I will say, like, Jacob has the line of, like, I didn't pluck any of you from an ideal life.
Yeah.
Which is what they were going for. Whether or not they executed that.
Yeah, but that's not like what
Stupidly
it
or not,
was
but-
being set up for. I feel like, I mean, I guess sort of, if you want to, like, they definitely had that from the beginning, that each character was going to have a pretty flawed life, you know, and then you can talk about like the cringe, like they were all lost in life before getting on the island, blah blah blah. But
That's why it's called Lost.
Getting
Yeah,
lost on the island allowed
that
them
is
to be found. Except for Charlie, who just found more heroin, and that was kind of
Shout out to
hilarious.
Charlie had the best redemption.
Yeah, he
out of
did.
any character.
That was yeah.
It was
He
pretty
did,
sick.
but what
I'm
are
gonna-
the
I
odds
have a
that a
list of my
plane
favorite
full of
episodes, and that's
heroin
on
was
it.
on the island when he was trying to get off of heroin?
But that's the thing, is when you introduce magic, there doesn't need to be odds. Like, it's all destiny, so it's
Yeah,
fine. Like,
I
that's,
guess.
and that's like the thing that's so central to the frustration of it, is like, rather than have to think about an explanation, you could just be like, oh, but magic, so don't worry about it, guys. Like, it's okay. It's fine. It's destiny. They were hand selected. All the coincidences are not coincidences, and we have no better explanation for it other than it was always supposed to be this way because a literal god who is the son of Alice and Janney decided
Not
to
actually.
make it happen. Like,
That's another annoying thing about the show that I really don't like, is that there's a lot of mystery in the show, obviously, but some of it you don't know what will come up later and what is just, you're supposed to take it literally, like, oh, it's just magic. Like the smoke monster is like a easy one. You know, he comes up in the first couple episodes, you're like, what is that? And then eventually you learn what it is. But then, like, Walt has psychic powers, and it's like, what does that mean? Well, we know he just has psychic powers.
he just has psychic powers.
No one explains it. He doesn't come back on the show really in any meaningful way. He just had psychic powers.
When I was going through my character glossary, like, I was thinking about adding that, and I was like, that really is something that
Can't explain
just
that
goes
one.
nowhere.
Well, it comes up. I think the ending is Walt is the new protector of the island. Because did you guys watch the epilogue episode?
No.
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 what
I
is
just
this
found out it
epilogue?
existed.
I've never seen
Yeah.
that.
I didn't know it existed either until a few days ago. It's all on YouTube. It's like 20 minutes. It's not even that long. There's like three big scenes. One of them I don't really understand. One of them was just like he goes to like this. Ben goes to this packing facility, and there's like these two guys that are like packaging stuff that gets sent to the island, and they've been working there for like 25 years. And Ben just comes along. He's like, "Yeah, you guys are fired. You don't need to work there anymore." And they're like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like. And then, I don't know, they had like this discussion, like, you know, what do you mean? And he's like, and Ben's like, I'll let you guys ask one question each, like as he's a fucking genie or something. And they ask him, literally, this is what happened.
Oh,
That's
what
literally
It's the
what happened.
worst.
And one guy's like, why are we sending polar bear snacks to a tropical island? And he's like, there's polar bears. And he's like, and they're like, what do you mean? And he's like, okay, let me pull out this video. And he pulls out this video explaining, it was like one of the Dharma videos. Who's the main dude? The main doctor that always comes up? I forget his name.
Miles' dad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is Miles' dad too. That's crazy. But he comes up and he's like, oh, this is a testing facility where we have polar bears here for some genetic testing reason. I don't know. That was like the whole scene. I don't really understand the purpose of that scene. I think it was there to explain what that Dharma facility did on the island, because maybe that wasn't explained before. I don't really know. But then you have another scene in the episode where he goes to visit Walt, who's at the Santa Monica facility. No, it's not Santa Monica. What's the like mental health institute thing that Hurley was at? What was that called?
Okay.
I don't remember.
Santa Clara. I
The
think it's
hospital?
Santa Clara was the something like that. Anyways, Walt's there now because he's having these psychic things, and he's like, I'm gonna go to this mental hospital because I'm whatever. And Ben goes to visit him, and Ben's like, hey Walt, you want to come back to the island? And he's like, why would I do that? He's like, oh, you can help your dad. And he's like, my dad's dead. And he's like, it doesn't mean you can't help him. And he's like, okay. And then he walks out of the facility into the blue van that's like from the island, and Hurley's in the van, and Hurley goes, hey Walt, you interested in a job? And then the episode ends. That's what I was talking about when in my speech was the retcon. I think very early on they wanted Walt to be set up as the new protector, because like he's like a kid who's innocent, he doesn't have flaws, blah blah blah, and he has this connection to the island, and
He
that
wasn't
was
on
being
the list.
Was he not?
Lol. I didn't see Walt.
Well, they probably decided not to show it like way after they decided to write him off, but he could have been.
See, that
Yeah,
makes
but
sense because in season 2 he's kidnapped. Well,
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Like they
Yeah.
gets kidnapped by the others, so it's like, why was he kidnapped in the first place? And it's like, so people were talking about this, and they're like, oh, they probably wrote him off because of like practical issues with how that works with the kid aging to like 20 when he's supposed to be 13. Then they kind of just step back and they're like, actually, we want Walt to be the protector, so we're gonna do this epilogue episode that came out like 6 months later.
That's so dumb.
I'm glad I didn't watch it. I usually don't watch like tie-in webisodes and stuff like that of series that I've watched.
I don't think it was a
I've always been curious.
webisode. It's just on YouTube because no one cares.
But apparently there was
this on TV?
also webisodes.
I don't know. It might have been a webisode, actually, maybe.
There
But I
was
don't-
definitely webisodes, but I don't know if this was released as one or if this was on TV. That's a good
'cause I saw it
question.
on like a random YouTube channel that was definitely not official.
Yeah.
Wikipedia says this is a 12-minute epilogue, but then there was also like webisodes called Lost, the Missing Pieces that are supposed to explain some of like the lore.
Oh, good.
Is that
Yeah.
like the showrunners talking about it, or is it like actually?
I don't know.
No, I think
I
they're
didn't have
fiction,
time to
like-
look into it further.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure there were fiction. I do remember seeing that there were like, even when I looked up some of the cast members and stuff, that they were listed as like like playing characters in some of these webisodes. So I do think they're fiction, but
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I won't talk about Game of Thrones and spoil that, but there's parallels.
none of
with
us are gonna
how-
watch it, Miguel. It's fine. We're never gonna watch it.
Yeah, I feel like actually Game of Thrones would be a topical talking point
Yeah.
because they both have disappointing finales. So go for it.
Yeah, well,
You're
like
the only one here
like
who's seen
one
it.
of the things in the end of Game of Thrones that a lot of fans found disappointing was that Bran, like the kid, the mystic kid of the Starks, he became the king, and they're like, what? And the show was kind of setting that up for a while. If you go back and like look at the little foreshadowing that happens in a lot of the seasons, but it was just so rushed in the end that like it just didn't make much sense. It's kind of similar with this, with like Walt being the kid that becomes the king of the island. He wasn't a big part of the show after like season 2, even though he's being set up as a big part of it, which sucks. I mean, that could have been a cool storyline too, but yeah, like they wrote themselves into a corner casting a 13-year-old as a 10-year-old, and then he got super tall after, and it's like, what do we do? We can't convince people he's 11 when he's taller than his dad.
And they really couldn't show him until after the time jump.
Yeah.
Because that's the next time we see him. Just like that one scene of him in the city. I'm happy with Hugo being the protector of the island, all things considered. If we're talking about how I said my ideal version is what happened with Locke dying and Jack dying. Obviously, those two are off the table. I feel like Kate deserved to go home with Sawyer, like they did. So I'm happy with Hugo being the one who stays behind, because he was probably the most pure of heart besides Walt and like Aaron, the literal baby. So
And with Libby dead, what was he gonna do?
yeah,
Guys,
Yeah.
Sad.
if we're talking about unexplained things in this show, as we have been vaguely talking about.
Could be the whole episode.
Libby, like, we get that episode, and it flashes back, and it turns out she was in the same mental health facility that Hugo was in. We never addressed that.
Nowhere, huh?
Well, that was, yeah, I mean, that was just, I think what they were trying to do is have another connection between Hugo and Libby, so that when she dies, it's like even more, because he remembers. Like, well, it's been a couple years since my last game, right?
He keeps saying, I feel like you're familiar, and she's like, no, we've never met, whatever. And then the episode ends on this, like, downbeat with, like, scary music, where it turns out, like, she was in the same mental health facility, and it's like, oh my god, does she remember him? Is this like why is she there? What's happening? And then she just dies, and it literally never comes up again.
Does the island like cure her mental illness? Is that explained in the show?
No, she got
was
better.
Her mental illness?
I don't know, but she seemed pretty crazy in that flashback.
We know nothing about Libby. It is so
well, except that she
weird.
lied and said she was a mental health professional. Didn't she say she was like a psychologist or something?
Yes, she.
That's technically true.
Well, yeah, I mean, she
mental
could
health
be.
professional.
She also gave a boat to Desmond.
Right.
That I have more problem with that, with just like her cameoing as
Yeah.
the person who gave Desmond his boat. That was pointless.
I forgot about that entirely.
She's
Yeah, I
the
will
one that
say
gave him the
some of-
sailboat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's like, I have a boat that I don't need anymore.
Speaking of characters that are just connected to everyone for no reason, Charles Woodmore, that guy, like, what?
Oh my god.
His whole storyline
I was
is
gonna
probably my least
ask
favorite.
Yeah.
because I kind of forget why he sent the boat to the island for Ben.
Because he
To
was
kill him.
there when in the time travel
No,
season.
I know he was there and
Yeah,
he
he's
was
an
with
other.
Ben's mother. But why?
Not Ben's mother. He was with Daniel's mother.
Daniel's
'cause he's
mother.
his father.
He-
because him and Ben are rivals because he was excommunicated, so he wants to
get back to the
like,
island.
And that's it.
He wants to get back to the
Just to
island
be
or
there?
like kill Ben and everyone on it.
He just wants to be the king of
Just
the
because
island,
he's
basically.
big mad. Okay.
Well, it's also because the island.
Yeah, well, he was one of the big bads besides the Man in Black, yeah, but
Yeah.
definitely weaker.
Yeah.
But so he just had bad intentions for no reason, just to like be
He
in
was just a
power
piece
and
of
say
shit, yeah.
fuck you, basically.
It is
Okay.
disappointing
His
in a show
motives
with so
weren't-
many well-developed characters that Charles Whitmore has. He's supposed to be the big bad, but he has almost no depth except I don't want you to date my daughter because I don't like you, and I want to destroy the island because they kicked me out.
And they didn't really kick him out. He, like, left freely, and they're like, you can't do that. And he's like, I want to leave. Go to the world. Because when he was in charge of the others, he would go back and forth between the world and the island. And then Jacob's like, nah, cut that. And he's like, no. And then
Yeah.
they replaced him with Ben. I
Yeah,
think that's
because
the
that was
storyline.
Jacob's whole thing.
I think you're right.
Was you're not allowed to leave the island. So, and then in the finale, Ben talks about how that was just like how Jacob wanted to do it. He was talking to Hugo. He's like, you can do it however you want, where you can freely leave the island and you can have a life on the mainland, but also be the leader. Since we're talking about characters though, and like since characters is the biggest talking point of the show, do you want to like go through our favorite characters? Because I have a list of mine, and like I'm sure you guys have thought about it at least while
Yeah.
you're watching the show. So I can start if you guys want.
Yeah.
So obviously, as I've already mentioned, Locke is number one for me. Like his whole philosophical debate with Jack, especially him paired with Jack. And I also have a list of character like duos that are my favorite in the show. Spoiler, one of them is Jack and Locke. Jack is pretty high up for me too, but I don't know, like for example, I don't know if I'd put him even in my top 5. He's not nearly as interesting as Locke, but paired with Locke, again, it really helps him. Another one for me is Desmond. Every Desmond episode. I don't think there was a single Desmond episode I didn't like.
They're all bangers.
Especially when we
Yeah.
start getting into the time travel stuff. Nowadays, time travel can be abused in storytelling and just lame, but like it was so cool that first episode after he experiences the hatch implosion, and he starts like he has memories because the structure of the show has been these flashbacks, but they're also revealed to be he is diegetically experiencing them in his real time, and then we get into the flash forwards too, so he's great. Mr. Echo, we've already mentioned. The few episodes we got of him were all gold. My favorite, though, is his first one, where he goes from being a drug lord to being a priest because his brother dies in the process. And then, if I'm going to say like a top 5, probably Hugo and Sawyer are my other two. Because Sawyer, I just love what they did, especially when they tied his parents' killer being John's dad. And Hugo, just because I love his personality and how he's one of the more innocent ones on the island, but still like is constantly seeking redemption, even though he doesn't really need it. What about you guys?
I actually have a really different list from you, Dan. I'll start with I don't have it ordered. I don't know how I would order it.
That's okay.
But Mr. Echo's in there. I'll just get that one out of the way because that's one we share. I think his solo episode, it might be my favorite episode of the series because it was like pretty much self-contained for the most part. His second episode where he dies, it was good up until his death. Yeah, I love that character, like from the moment he was introduced. Sun and Jin, I really loved. That Sun and Jin reunion, even though they got there.
It
I
took
probably
so
cried
long, though. Too long.
It did, but it was so good.
It was
worth
so
it. It was
good.
so good.
Yeah.
But just like them in general in the first season, I just really love those characters and seeing how their relationship played out throughout the first couple seasons. And Desmond is one of my favorites. He's like the underdog kind of character, like, you know, no one cares about, no one trusts, blah blah blah. But he eventually like not redeems
so
himself.
charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's so yeah, but I don't want to say he redeems himself, but he kind of like proves himself by the end of it, which is cool. So that's what I Sun and Jin I kind of group up just because they're like a package deal.
All of their flashbacks were like together, so
Yeah, I don't know. I really like a lot of the characters, but I don't know if they're not like on that level. Like I like Saeed.
those are like your upper echelon.
I like Hugo, but I wouldn't put them. I like Charlie a lot, but yeah, like the main characters like John, Jack, Sawyer, Kate. They were interesting. Like they were great characters, but they're not my favorite. If that makes sense, you know. Like I'm not rooting for any of them. I don't care about them succeeding in that way. Like they're really complex characters, and they all have their, you know, interesting bits and pieces. But I'm not like rooting for them in any way.
I'll jump off and do my list off the top of my head. It's very close to yours, Dan, I will say. We'll start with Desmond. This is also no particular order because I haven't really thought too hard about how...
Sure. Also, you don't have to do top 5 if you guys don't want.
No, top 5's great because there's so many characters. I feel like top 3 doesn't really... I would be missing out. Yeah, Desmond, fantastic. That episode, The Constant, is probably my favorite episode in the whole series. It's really good, and I feel like all his stuff is so tied into the sci-fi aspects of the show, which is obviously where my heart lies, is sci-fi. So yeah, and he's just super charismatic actor. I was down for all of that. I would put Locke in the top 5 as well for me. As we've said, comically pathetic, but I also think like he's also just... I think a lot of it is the performance with him as well. Like I really think the actor who plays Locke does a very, very good job with what could have been a role that like skews too far one side or the other, and he really like did something special with what he was given for that character. Yeah, I just, again, super interesting. Like, don't always agree with him and whatever, but just super, like, anytime he had a flashback episode, it was a good episode. He did not have one bad flashback episode, and I feel like almost everyone else had at least one bad flashback episode. So, okay, this is where it gets dicey, guys.
Tough.
I'm gonna, oh wait, Mr. Echo, not dicey. Mr. Echo definitely top 3 for sure. In the small amount of time he was on the show, for him to have the impact he had, just goes to show what a great character he was.
That's the most impressive part.
And again, just amazing performance with strong writing for him. Wish he got to do more. Okay, so I'm gonna go Saeed for number 4.
Okay.
I think as the show goes on, Saeed gets fucked over almost more than anyone when he gets brought back to life and then becomes like a, I don't even know, like a puppet. Like he doesn't even have like a personality anymore, and like it's awful. But in particular, the first 3 seasons, I thought he was really, really strong, and I really liked all his flashbacks. And also like timely for stuff that was happening at that time as well, obviously, because of like, shout out to our favorite subject to bring up, but 9/11 and racism and stuff. So yeah, I really liked Saeed's inclusion in the show.
Very inclusive.
Yeah, very inclusive for the time period.
Of course that had to be brought up.
So good.
This is like, what, 5-6 years after? That's...
No,
Yeah.
it was like 3 years after.
Wait, I thought it started in 07. Am I wrong?
The show started in 2004.
Whoa.
Wow,
whoa,
really?
whoa.
So this was very, it was fresh.
Very,
like it was very
awesome.
fresh.
And they have an Iraqi guy as one of the co-leads. Sick.
Wow, that's crazy.
Okay, here's where I'm stuck. I'm stuck between 2 right now for my 5th spot. It could go Sawyer or it could go Sun and Jin. And
I love that they can't be their own character.
No.
I mean, you can pick one of them.
No,
if
if
Speaking
I
of
was-
Sun and Jin, just
Yeah.
real quick, their death was like beautiful. It's like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a really...
Too soon after their reunion, though.
Oh, I know.
It
So
was
sad.
really soon
And-
after, but at least they got the reunion.
And like you said, Marco, how like the whole Saeed in season 6 thing sucks, but I do love how like he still has it in him to make that final sacrifice and
Yeah.
blow up. Like
Yeah.
he takes the brunt of the bomb, but also unfortunately Sun and Jin
Racist,
were-
but That's fine.
Super racist. They had to save all their racism for the last season.
For the last season.
An Iraqi guy has C4 on his chest. All of a sudden. That's crazy.
It was not on his chest.
I mean, he was running with it on his chest, pretty much.
Yeah, so I think I have to give the leg up to Sun and Jin, only because I think the show did such a good job of like keeping them apart and bringing them back together, and that was all very emotionally compelling for me. And then I think even like prior to that arc, they were just very consistent. I really like Sawyer as the show goes on. In the beginning of the show, I had a bit of a harder time with Sawyer because he was a bit of a caricature of like the like douchebag hot guy, like I don't give a fuck about anything. And I know that's obviously the point because he like grows and changes. But I think if I'm looking at both of them across the entirety of the show, Sun and Jin are probably just a bit more consistent for me. Whereas I think Sawyer like starts off in a place that I didn't care about and then significantly spikes to be like a really great character, probably sometime in season 2. I don't know. It's all blending together. But yeah, that would be my top 5.
Okay.
Yeah, once Sawyer's backstory is revealed, that makes like him way more interesting.
Yeah.
100%.
Because that's a crazy storyline.
And I feel like even the performance, like the
actors, all the actors are just like 10 out of 10.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Like, I can't think of one bad actor on the show.
Well,
like
I can.
In the main cast.
Who?
Like
Yeah,
the,
okay.
like the important characters.
There is one.
Yeah.
There is one.
Okay, I don't remember.
Who
but
are you
I can't
thinking
wait.
of?
Michelle Rodriguez.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She can't act.
She just
Like,
can't
there's
act,
no way
but
around it.
that's fine. Yeah, I think that the only the thing I was gonna say about the actor for Sawyer is just that even his performance, I think, before some of the plot things were revealed, was a little bit more caricature-y and harsh. And then I think as those plot elements come in, not only do we as an audience sympathize with him more, but then I think it really like informed the actor's performance a little bit to be like, oh, okay, I got it. Like I know how to like straddle that line now in a way that maybe it was too far to one side before. So 100% I agree with you. He takes a big spike in quality, but yeah, Jin and Sun, number 5.
Okay. And I think in a way that my list will differ from most of yours is Locke is not going to be on mine, and Mr. Echo also won't be.
Whoa!
Cancel the show.
Whoa! Stop the
Cancel
podcast.
I don't know what it is about him. Maybe because like religious trauma. I don't know, but just like I understand. You don't know what's going on. You're scared. You rely on religion to help you feel better. I understand that. I sympathize with that. But it was just like a little too much for me, and it really like distanced me from that character personally. I understand what he did for the story and what he could have done, and maybe by the end, if it went the original way it was supposed to, I would have changed my mind. But just the little bit that we saw of him, it wasn't doing it for me. So he's not one of my faves. I kind of struggle with the top 5 because like the immediate names that jump to mind are definitely Saeed. I think he's my favorite character, not including the end because like he just wasn't really doing much by then because he just died, I guess. And then it was just evil incarnate or whatever.
Can I ask something about that actually?
Yeah, that was also confusing. That whole temple situation.
Super weird.
Okay, I don't want to talk about that. That was awful. But when I can't remember when he like sacrificed himself or whatever. Did he actually save anyone? Because Sun and Jin died on the same submarine.
Everyone else.
He saved Jack.
Yeah.
He saved Jack, Kate, and Hurley.
They were all on the submarine. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, the final candidates were there because he's like, I know it's gonna be you, Jack. Like I'm gonna die so that you can, and like I'm dead already, basically.
Okay.
So I'm gonna run this bomb away so like maybe you can live. That was what he was trying to do.
I see. But Sun and Jin, what? Like they weren't in the air. Like why did they get stuck?
Sun was trapped.
Oh yeah, she was trapped.
Yeah, they drowned.
And
Yeah, and
basically,
then
Yeah,
Jin refused
he
to
goes.
leave
I'm not
her.
gonna leave your side. Oh,
yeah.
That was beautiful.
That was so
But
good.
their child was left behind. Anyway, so they're also in my top 5. I also love them. I mean, it's so hard because like even when I'm like, yes, I love these characters, I like am also obviously forgetting a lot of stuff about them, like purposely forgetting. Like Jin is literally killing people, and like everyone killed people. I fucking guess.
It's just about it's about how
part of the redemption.
how
He tortured
interesting they
people
are.
as a job.
Yeah, no, it's okay. He was a war criminal, but it's fine.
Yeah,
Don't worry
so
about
ignoring
it.
all of that.
Yeah.
Because Sawyer is also one of my favorite characters, despite him being just like a fucking racist, misogynistic asshole when we first meet him.
That needs glasses.
Yeah. That's
he
the
reads.
worst part about him.
It's a flaw. It's a character flaw. You can't see.
Yeah, he's also in my top 3. And honestly, Kate would have been in my top 3 if we ever, like, actually got to know her. Because I feel like the one biggest issue I have with Kate is that, yeah, every flashback informed a bit of her story and her struggle and whatever, but just, like, I still never knew what was going on in her head. I never knew who she liked better. I never knew why she wasn't, like, I mean, yeah, like, trauma with, like, fathers and father figures and what romantic partners, whatever, but just like I never really understood who she was going to pick or why she was hiding these, I don't know. So that was frustrating, but she could have been in the top 5 if they let us understand her a bit more, but I guess we don't need to. She was just there to be naked and fuck people, I guess. What also, when they were in cages and had sex, that was hilarious.
That was so funny.
That was so funny.
I just want to jump off this point for a quick second to say 2 things. One, I think you very eloquently said exactly what I was trying to get across with why I dislike Kate, which is not... It's because every single one of her flashbacks and everything she's involved in is plot. Like, it's all plot. Yeah. And the actual character elements of it never, like, don't change or grow in ways that I find particularly interesting. There's, like you're saying, there's, like, nothing revealed where I'm like, I can really latch onto this other than, like, I want to be a free person. And I'm like... Yeah.
Does she change at all in the show? Like, she's the same person.
Yeah, like, the writers
like,
just kind of were so lazy with her.
Yes. It's like they were so focused on, like, that element of, like wanting to be a free person and stuff. Like, she has to be hot and
badass and a fugitive, and, like, that's the most important part.
Yeah.
And, like,
can you guys
don't care what she's feeling, where, or, like, why.
Yeah. Can you guys believe that the prisoner was actually a woman? Oh, my God. What?
It's like she was just there to be in the love triangle.
Yes.
Literally, it was really frustrating.
That is my other point that I was going to jump off of, which is... And this is one of the things that I was talking about of this being such a fucking network TV show, is like the constant switching of the like the love triangle, and then even
Juliet.
Even when Juliet gets introduced, and it's like everybody at some point has to be in love with one man on the show, and like every female character
never lock,
but every female character is either in love, pregnant, dying. Or, like, dying for love. Except, like, Sun, who arguably has, like, more things to do, although her death is also based in love. But I get that one more, because at least they were introduced as, like, a husband-wife pair.
That were, like, struggling in the relationship.
Yes,
and
100%.
Like, they need to repair that on the island.
Exactly.
Well, that's why even looking at my list, I'm so frustrated, because, like, first of all, there are just, by sheer numbers, so many more men. Yeah. But I'm, like, almost trying to pick some women to be my favorite, but just none of them were really fleshed out enough for that to happen. Like, they were just kind of, like, not important, honestly. So, yeah, so we got Sawyer, we got Saeed, we got Sun and Jin, so I guess kind of a female character. Half of my character is a female.
Yeah.
And then probably, Desmond is great. I think maybe just Hurley, because, I do just feel bad for him. He just thought he would run into some luck, and it was the opposite, and he just wanted to find some love, and he couldn't, and, like, everyone just made fun of him all the time and thought he was useless, and I just felt so bad. Yeah. So those are my top 5. Miles is an honorable mention. I think I like him.
Oh, Miles is pretty good.
I still don't understand
I just don't like how
his
much of a little
powers,
shit he
but
can be sometimes.
I don't like Miles. Because, one, another example of just having unexplained magical powers, unrelated to the plot of the show. And 2, to your point, Dan, and I think this is more of a performance thing. Not that I think the actor does a bad job, but he definitely leans into the, like, the little shit line deliveries a little bit. And I'm like, can you please... I need, like, 15% less of that and no magical powers. But, like... I think on paper he's a pretty solid character, but it just didn't come together for me.
Russo is also honorable mention.
Yeah,
Danielle.
She was
solid.
I think I was thinking about this, like, female characters on the show. She's probably the most fleshed out character.
Yeah.
Even though she's, like, not in it even remotely close to how much Kate's in the show.
Yeah.
But, like, Rousseau's storyline is really more interesting.
It is.
She, like, finds her daughter, and, she's been stranded.
I would have liked a flashback episode for her, actually.
Yeah.
Like a episode centered around her.
Yeah, they didn't do that.
I mean, the closest we get is when they're traveling through time on the island, and of course one of the things they run into is when her expedition team comes to the island, because they have to hit all the greatest hits.
The greatest hits of Lost.
Yeah, I think my least favorite plot point is when the nuke goes off and they just get transported to 2007 again. Like, what is the point of even traveling back? Like, the whole point of like them traveling back was what? Just to like make sure the paradox of your plot works. Like,
yeah.
Well, that's not even the problem I have with it. I have the realistic problem of why would it send them? Why would it not either
just
be
kill
like,
them.
Well, why would they not die? Yeah, first of all,
whatever.
But
We
like,
can get past that.
no, can we?
I mean, the island like cures cancer. Like, whatever. They don't.
No, but
So
my
true.
problem is like it should have either kept them in the 1970s and sealed the timeline like the rules of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban,
Yeah.
where you do the thing to prove the thing happening in the timeline, or it should have been they should have died. For me, those are the only two options. So like it really, I was racking my brain in the past, even just the past couple weeks preparing for this episode, being like, am I missing some rationale for why the writers chose to have this and just like let us accept it?
But Dan, how else would they get back?
I know, that's the thing, is like, how else would they get back? I think that's literally the only reason why it happens that way. But
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
And then the other thing that bothers me is it also creates this parallel universe, or maybe it's not a parallel universe. We can talk. I have a question for you guys about that in a minute. It's not just what if they had never crashed on the island. There's also little inconsistencies about it that are just random, like Desmond is on the plane now, for example. I don't know why that would change that fact. But the question I have...
Wait, what? Was he actually?
In season 6,
season 6 premiere,
Yeah.
It's the big crazy reveal. Is like the first scene is that the island is underwater and everyone's on the plane and it lands safely. And also Desmond is a passenger on the plane and he's sitting next to Jack. But here's my question for you guys: is do you think that alternate timeline is implied to be a multiversal what if timeline, or just like the purgatory state of every character being like, even if in another life we found each other, we would grow our relationship similarly like we did with our experience on the island? Because I think the latter. I think
I
that
also
makes
think
more
the
sense to
latter.
me.
I read about this,
Yeah,
and
I
I know
think
what
the
the
internet-
showrunners
yeah.
have said. I've talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
It is not an alternate timeline. There's no alternate timelines on this. Like, that's what they didn't write that. It was supposed to be like this purgatory thing. I'm not really sure what the full explanation was, but the whole point of that, I think they call it a flash sideways.
Yeah.
Was for them to like group up at the church eventually and connect with each other, and reminisce about their time on the island before they can move on to the afterlife. But the thing was like they wanted to make it very clear that they didn't all die on the crash. That flash sideways, they enter that dimension or whatever whenever they truly die.
Yeah.
You know, it could be 10
Time
years,
isn't
20
a
years, 30 years.
concept.
Yeah, so they all just like go into that. But I don't know what the point is of the flash sideways, to like live out their lives in a different way. Like, what's that?
I'm
Like,
kind of
they
with
just-
you, Miguel, is like the idea of it being, let's say, purgatory. Like, they don't specifically call out Catholicism or Christian stuff, but like, let's just say, because that's an easy shorthand for us, we're all familiar with it. So it's so weird to me that like the way that they wrote purgatory in the show is just like real life, but also like, what if a few things were different? But then it also implies like, so is everyone in these flashes sideways? It's a fully populated universe. Is this a fully populated universe of people who are all dead and don't know that they're dead? Or also, why is Purgatory 2007? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand the logistics of it, like, being the life that you knew. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Can I give my interpretation?
Sure.
So, based on watching the show and then watching all the little recaps I just did and doing all my reading, this is now my interpretation and this is my headcanon, and you can choose to subscribe to it or not.
All right.
I see it as though, yes, that's where you go when you die. So, it's all of these people who were on this plane and had these relationships who are like in their lost soul era. And so they can't go to heaven, they can't go to hell, they can't do whatever the heck they did in the end when they all reunited. I don't know where they were going there, but they can't do that yet because they something's missing. It's like the reason people think we have ghosts. You know, there's something. So they have to find each other because that was all of their most meaningful connections in their real life. So what they've created is a familiar enough world for all of them. So I guess 2007, around the time that they would have been taking this plane journey. A familiar world with familiar people, and kind of like in a dream where maybe it isn't actually the souls of all these dead people, but it's just your brain filling in the gaps. So it's not just a world with like 10 people in it. And so that they have to find each other, and then when they do in the end, they can now all comfortably pass together to wherever the hell.
See, and like that, it does make sense. Like, I do think that is very much what the show is trying to get across.
But I don't think everyone there is also dead people trapped with them.
And that's fair, but to me it's weird because it brings up, in my mind, for example, a movie that we all love, The Matrix.
I was going to bring this up.
Good. And as you know, in The Matrix is the year 1999, okay? But it makes sense because the computers that enslaved humanity just picked like the last normal year or whatever. Like, they just picked this arbitrary year that everybody is enslaved in. And yeah, in real life, like, it's because the movie was made around that time. But there's like a very quick, easy logistical explanation. I think my problem with The Flash's Sideways is not that it is this purgatory place and they all have unresolved issues and they need to find each other before they're able to move into the afterlife. Cool. It's the like bullshit lazy writing trick of making it be 2007 and making it seem like it's an alternate timeline where the plane didn't crash, only to like pull the rug out from under you in the last episode. Like, to me, they went into that season knowing that they wanted it to be the intention we've all talked about, and I would rather have them done something more creative with The Flash's Sideways rather than have it open up this whole like alternate reality. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's like a lazy storytelling device. Like, you can do Purgatory and do it in a way that's more interesting than this. I thought it was just, yeah.
It's crazy to introduce, because they know when they were doing like season 5 and stuff that The Flash Sideways would be interpreted as an alternate.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to introduce that when you still have this time travel stuff that's like doesn't make it, like, they're like, how can we make this show even more confusing?
Yeah.
And way harder to resolve in the end.
That's the thing, is
I get what they're trying to do with the last episode and all that, but yeah, I completely agree. Like, the execution of that was awful, and I bet you no one who watched the show without Googling stuff afterwards would have come to that conclusion. Even though his dad, I think, like, says a very like literal line, like, "Oh, you guys had to come here to move on." I bet you no one would remember. They'd be like a week after that, they would not remember that line and be like, I don't know. I think they're all dead the whole time. Like, people did have that takeaway, which is like hilarious. But also,
I'm really glad that the literal timeline was intended by the writers to be, no, this actually happened. Like, they weren't dead as soon as they crashed on the island.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That would have been really upsetting, honestly.
That's the only thing that could have been worse than what happened.
That would have been truly the worst thing ever.
It was just a dream in John Locke's head.
No, dude.
And he's going back to McDonald's or whatever.
I will say, as cheap as it maybe was, when they did start to remember and find each other in this like purgatory place, like, there were a lot of like very touching reunions.
Yeah. And
I will acknowledge, like, yeah, it was a lazy way for them to do that, but like, as a person who just judges things on how they make me feel, I loved that.
So, and this is so great, and I want to jump off that because when I was texting Dan about the last episode, and I was like, okay, I finished it, and Dan was like, all right, what are your thoughts now that you've finished it? My first reaction was that I think the last episode of Lost is the best that it could have been given the nonsense we saw in the last 2 seasons. Yeah. So I completely agree with you that those reunions in that last episode was so touching, and like, I loved all of them. Anytime we had a reunion with somebody remembering, like, it was all done so well. Even the last scene, as cheesy and over the top as it is, I thought was very touching. But exactly what you said, it's unearned. Like, the last 2 seasons, nonsense. But like, I don't know, they all managed to come together and pull together for this episode and be like, all right, guys, we really fucked up, but we need to like do the best with what we have right now.
There was a huge level of damage control that went into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. But yeah, it's funny that you talked about The Matrix. I'll just like quickly say what I was going to say with the fact that their purgatory is like populated. It makes sense to me to have this adaptation of purgatory where it is kind of a simulation in your own mind. And that's why I was going to bring up, it's like being in The Matrix, where the people around you, for you, aren't real. but then the other people in your purgatory, or not in your purgatory, in purgatory, that are experiencing their perspective of it, it's the same thing where all the people around them aren't real, but like for them it is real. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Did they ever mention in that timeline that it's 2007 though?
No, but I'm just
We were
going
saying
off
whatever
of like,
year, yeah.
like whatever year because the plane didn't crash and then
So
we picked up with
2004
them.
then, technically.
Okay, sorry,
2004.
2000.
See that?
Yeah, whatever.
No,
That
I
makes
think
sense to
I think the
me.
Wikipedia page is also 2007.
Oh.
That's why I said
For
2007.
the side timeline,
Oh, for the side timeline, no, but the
it is
crash,
2007 in the present date, like the actual timeline.
But like I guess because they're on the plane.
I'm assuming, yeah, it's the
So it would
same.
have been 2004 then. See, that makes more sense to me
2004, I guess,
for
yeah.
most of the characters because that was the year of the crash. But it wouldn't make sense for, I don't know, someone like Desmond
Yeah.
because like he crashed long before the plane
Exactly.
crashed, for example.
And I also think, you know what could have been cool, and I think this is part of what is such a bad transition from season 5 to 6 when we're going from sci-fi to fantasy. And it does start with them all on the plane, and you're like, okay, is this an alternate reality or what's going on? I would have liked it so much more if each character's flashback episode was like clearly a completely different reality, even if it is still in obviously 2004 where it's like they're picking up from their lives. But the fact that each character's flashback episode, when they interact with other characters, they all like it has the same continuity, like it all takes place in the same reality, I guess you could say, where it's like in Sawyer's episode he's doing this job, and then in Kate's episode he's also doing that job. I think it would have been more interesting if like each person's purgatory was like completely different. So like what's going on in Kate's episode and what Jack or Sawyer are up to is completely fucking different from what's going on in either of their episodes, which admittedly, as the show was going on, would have been more confusing for viewers, but I feel like builds up better to
the
the
viewers
finale.
needed to be more confused, Marco.
I was
But
gonna
it's-
say,
I think it's
in concept,
better.
That's really cool, but it would have been hard to like with how many puzzle pieces they're already throwing
Yeah.
at the viewers. That probably would have been hard
And
to
keeping
pull
in
off, but I
mind the
like that
early
idea a lot.
internet it was coming out on, like there's not a nice way for people to like keep track and re-reference this stuff, you know what I mean?
That's fine. That's fair. But you know what?
Yeah, and that all goes back to the whole like if this was made today as a binging show,
Yeah.
that could have worked a lot
Exactly,
better, I think.
exactly. I think that's the best version of doing like a purgatory flashback type scenario. Because they're all clearly living in a reality where they all have like the same things going on and it's like a shared continuity. I think that pushes you as you're watching towards thinking of it as an alternate timeline, which is not what it's supposed to be. And I think that's where a lot of that confusion comes in. So like it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. Like they were fucked. There was no way they were going to be able to pull it off.
Was there any visual cue for the flash sideways? Like for example,
Oh, like
Better Call
color
Saul.
correction or something?
Like Better Call Saul, whenever they had like a future scene, it would go black and white. Like that was
Yeah,
like I mean,
no,
but
I don't think so.
that's like a very simple thing. But like even if there was like some like vignetting around the edge, like something
Yeah.
to like make it different from the flashbacks, you know, just visually.
Yeah,
so that
Just
you
them
know,
being
like
off the island. That was it.
I guess
Besides
that
the
was
fact
it.
that like,
But, like-
if they're not on the island, then you
But there's
know,
also,
yeah.
but when they first started doing that, people thought, or at least I thought, that was like them after they got rescued or something. Like these are flash forwards,
Me
to, like
too,
them
for a
getting
second.
after they got, right? Like that's kind of what it seemed like. Like oh, this is after they got rescued, blah blah blah.
Well, no, I didn't think it was after they got rescued. I did think it was just like a simultaneous timeline. Like I think maybe because
Oh, an
we've all
alternate?
seen too much like of the MCU at this point. That's why I was like, just another timeline, whatever.
But
There can
I
be
don't-
hundreds. Who
Yeah.
cares?
I'm going to disagree with this. I don't think it's because of the MCU. I think it's because season 5 ends with a fucking nuke going off, and then you see that the island is underwater, and the plane doesn't crash. And I think that's like, to your point, Miguel, in terms of just like pure visual storytelling.
Yeah.
I don't know how else you're supposed to read that. I don't know what you would like see that and be like, oh yeah, this is purgatory. Like it,
Yeah.
like it's so clearly setting it up to be like, this is a what if scenario, only to pull the rug out from under you and be like, psych, motherfuckers.
That is a really good point that I've never thought about. Is like if they had given a certain color identity to the flashbacks in season 1 through 3, and then the forwards in 4 and 5, and then another color for the sideways in the last season.
Yeah,
I don't
like
know how
keep
much
the
it would've
reality
helped, but-
stuff the same. Like you can, however you shoot the island stuff, shoot the flashbacks and like whatever is actually part of the real timeline in a certain way. And anything that's like purgatory or like whatever, like
Yeah.
that should have been something should have been a tell for the viewer. Be like, oh, you know, there's something off with this. You know,
Or even if it was more overexposed a little bit to give off like this
Literally
ethereal
anything.
purgatory
Yeah, like a
state.
dreamy kind of like
Yeah.
any.
Well,
Yeah.
but I don't think they
'cause
wanted you
a lot
to
of shows do that.
think that. Like, that was the big reveal. It would have been,
But
like,
that's-
weird if it was too shiny or
But
bright
why?
or whatever.
What is the value of?
It's a reveal
don't know.
for a reveal's sake. It's not like the fun of a reveal.
There's no shock. It's just like, oh, that's what they were doing,
Exactly.
and then that's all you get from it. It's not like, whoa.
true.
I feel like
I think it would
the
have
smoke
landed
monster's
better
the
if it
minute, but
wasn't.
like, there's no like cool mystery being solved
yeah.
when they do that. It's just like you're confusing us for a season. Like, what do you? What is this?
I think that's the
And then-
problem is like with any mystery stuff, the fun is like picking up clues along the way, having those theories, trying to understand what's going on, and then whether or not you get to what you thought it was or not, seeing those clues come together and give you an explanation is interesting, right? And like the biggest problem with season 6, at least for me in that stuff, is it's the opposite of it's like the worst episodes of Sherlock. Like, as we've talked about, like, Sherlock is a fun show we all love, and the good episodes, it's like when Sherlock puts something together at the end, you're like, oh, that's cool, I see how he took those pieces. But then there's also episodes of that show where it's like, shut the fuck up. Like, you're literally just like, you're explaining away nonsense to come to a conclusion. There was no way. That's how I feel about this in season 6, where just in the last episode being like, yep, it's purgatory, they're going to heaven now. It's like, okay. I mean, you could have said literally anything. Like, it doesn't make it anything. Like, it's not. Then what was the point of any of the flashbacks? We were never going to guess that. We never had any sense it was leading up to anything like that. So I don't know. I thought it was just poor mystery story. Like, the mystery of it could have been told better throughout, is all.
They use red herrings a lot in the show. I can't remember all of them, obviously, because it's been a while, but I mean, there's a few I do remember it. But like, that one is just like, I don't see the point. Like, if you want to misdirect the audience, like, okay, that you do that a lot anyways, but there should be like, I don't know, some sort of like, oh, I get it now, like,
Yeah.
it's all coming together. But it didn't really feel like that because the purgatory thing doesn't connect to anything else. It's just
Exactly.
like, you guys need to go to the afterlife, so you have to do this. But it has nothing to do with the island, other than like they were on the island. Every other storyline is just like not connected to that at all. I feel it. Like, what's the point of the purgatory afterlife thing?
Well, for me, it's not that there's no point to the purgatory afterlife, but it's not. It's the problem of that plot reveal doesn't unlock something in your brain that goes like, oh, so if that means that,
Yeah.
this also means this. that
That's
you
what I'm
didn't
saying.
realize.
Yeah, it's like, what else is it connected to in the show that?
But I have no
doesn't
problem
help
with
explain?
the fact that that alternate timeline is a purgatory state, because that's the theme of the show, was like these characters coming together. So that fits well for me. But it's like the fact that they try and play it off as a plot twist didn't land.
Yeah, it's literally a plot. Yeah, it's literally a plot.
Okay, if you guys don't have another point right now to talk about, I'm going to do my usual mopping up of all the notes I haven't mentioned yet.
Go for it.
So I'm going to go through just a few of my favorite character dynamics, like I talked about before. One is Jack and Locke, I've mentioned already, but I also like how Jack and Kate and Jack and Sawyer are all at some point kind of striving for that leadership position, and it comes to the forefront most with Locke, but I figured it was worth noting with Kate and Sawyer as well. I feel like at certain points during the show, all of them were intended to act as the temporary lead protagonist for a portion of their show during various seasons. Desmond and Charlie I like a lot. I just like their on-screen presence together.
They were cute.
And I haven't talked about Charlie much.
Yeah.
I like Kate and Son and how they connect after the crash and how the Oceanic 6 go back to the mainland. Similarly, Sawyer and Jin on the island during that time. And then Locke and Ben, of course, because of Locke's connection with the others more than the other survivors. And then the last note I have is my favorite episodes. Just like handpicking, just a handful of my favorite episodes from each season. And surprise, surprise, the list of my favorite episodes going from season to season dwindles after season 3. So from season 1, my favorites are obviously the pilot, a powerhouse of a pilot. The Walkabout is John's first episode. Homecoming is the one where Claire returns, like we talked about before, from being kidnapped, and that's where we first get like the first real confrontation with the others, because that's where Ethan, who we haven't mentioned yet, comes back. The group had just recently found those guns on the island, and that's like when they first used them, basically. Deus Ex Machina is another Locke episode. He and Boone chase after the drug plane. And that's also the one that ends with Locke like crying over the hatch. And I just want to say that the music track that plays during that scene is, I think, my favorite part of the Lost series soundtrack. Season 2, the premiere, Man of Science, Man of Faith, which is where they go down the hatch. We meet Desmond for the first time. The Other 48 Days, which is one of the 2 or 3 episodes in the whole show, I think, that doesn't have the traditional structure, because that whole episode in and of itself is a flashback showing the perspective of the tail section crew. The 23rd Psalm is Mr. Echo's first episode. The Long Con is one of Sawyer's episodes. So in Sawyer's first episode, we get that scene of him like conning someone and how he does his shtick. But then in this episode of his, we get that scene again with another person, but the person's like, you're really trying that on me. Like, her name is Cassidy. You're really trying that with me? Like, I know what you're trying to do. And instead of turning him in, she decides to learn like how to do it herself. So they like strike up a relationship, and then in the end, the episode's called The Long Con because he ends up like, this was his intent the whole time, and he just cons her out of all the money. And it's a great character development point for Sawyer. Lockdown is the episode where Locke loses one of his kidneys to his dad, and we've talked about that already. The finale for season 2, Live Together, Die Alone, is where Desmond returns and we get his first backstory, so obviously I love that one. The Cost of Living is Mr. Echo's death in season 3. Flashes Before Your Eyes is the first Desmond time travel episode. Oh, I wanted to quickly mention this one too. Trisha Tanaka is Dead is the episode where Hurley, Charlie, Jin, and Sawyer fix up that van.
That's
and
a
it's
great
just such
one.
a feel-good episode. Pretty self-contained too, but it also comes back in the season 3 finale, which is fun. The Man from Tallahassee is the one where Locke falls out of the 8-story window. So obviously that's a super important one. And then The Brig is the episode where Sawyer kills Locke's dad. Greatest Hits is the Charlie's Memories, his favorite memories episode right before he dies. And then subsequently Through the Looking Glass, the season 3 finale, is where Charlie dies, and the whole, like, that is like probably my favorite episode in the entire series, the season 3 finale. I just think that's where the tensions are highest. But the next one is, I guess, my second favorite, The Constant, in season 4. We've talked about it already. I also like in season 4 Meet Kevin Johnson, where Michael returns on the boat after not seeing him for a long time. And then in season 4, the finale, There's No Place Like Home, where the flash forwards come to a head and we see where the Oceanic Six, how they get off the island and stuff. Season 5, The Life and Death of Jeremy Bentham, Locke's death. That's one of my favorite episodes of the series as well. And then Le Fleur, where we see Sawyer and everyone living in the 1970s in the Dharma Initiative. And The Incident, which is the season 5 finale. Season 6, I put the premiere because, you know, it doesn't get paid off well, but as like an intro scene, it is definitely one of the more significant scenes to mention. So I like that episode a lot in and of itself. The Richard episode, Ab Eterno, which is, you know, Richard's backstory. It's the only one we get, but it's a very well put together episode, and it's cool to find out why he's immortal and like that he comes from the 1800s and stuff, and his relationship with Jacob and the Man in Black and stuff. The Candidate, where Sun and Jin die. We've talked about that one a little bit already. And I had to put the finale because it wasn't handled well, but it was one of the most significant talking points of the entire show. So I couldn't live without it, obviously.
What happened to Richard? I'm just thinking about
He
this
got
now.
off the island. And he lost his immortality when they destroyed the heart of the island. So he could live a normal life, kind of. But he was on the plane with the few of them that escaped, like Kate Sawyer, Miles, and Claire.
Oh, honorable mention for my favorite characters, Frank Lapidus.
Yeah.
Sick character.
Yeah, gotta love Frank.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about Michael that much. He was a pretty interesting character too. The most shocking scene is when he killed
Yeah.
Ana Lucia and
Yeah.
what's her name?
Libby.
Libby.
yeah.
That was
That was a good
like,
scene.
jaw-dropping. Like,
Yeah.
what did I just watch? That was a crazy episode.
The plot leading up to the season 2 finale was very
Yeah.
intense as well.
Yeah, those first couple seasons.
Yeah, like I think just some plot points that I either like really liked or rediscovered and find kind of ridiculous but still enjoyed just because so much happens. Like I forget that they literally just built a raft and were gonna try to sail away on it, and that was crazy. I feel like when
And it's so realistic compared to where the show
Right?
goes
I
know,
later. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
realistic
before
until
all the fantasy
Walt
stuff.
gets
like,
stolen, and then we have to figure that whole thing out. But like I kind of loved when they were in the 70s. Like I found that really fun.
after the time traveling stopped and they just stayed put there, it was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I liked the alternate timeline that happened when they just like lived there for 3 years and just like made their peace with it. I found that
Yeah.
kind of
That's why I love the LaFleur episode so much.
Yeah.
Speaking of that timeline, we didn't talk about Saeed shooting Ben as a kid. Like that whole that's like the whole paradox that that they had to like write in is that like they tried to stop Ben but created Ben by trying to stop Ben.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
well, it's the Harry Potter rules. Like they,
Exactly.
in doing so,
Yeah, exactly.
they create. Yeah,
So that was interesting. Wasn't there like an
also-
episode where like they see a picture of like themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like-
Well, no, because okay,
Very
we didn't talk about this
Shining.
either. But another stupid thing. Yeah, The Shining. Another stupid thing is how only half of the people on the plane get traveled to the 1970s when they crash again,
Yeah.
and Sun and Lapidus are still
Yeah.
in the present day.
Yeah.
And they see that picture of Hurley, Jack, and Kate and everyone in the 1970s.
Oh, that's what it
I think
was.
that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Of. That was dumb.
No.
There's no
Yeah,
explaining
that
that.
was
Why?
really
And
fucking
also,
stupid.
why wasn't Saeed with Jack and Kate and everyone when he traveled back in time? Like he was just in the jungle and they captured him separately.
I also
There's no
forgot that
explanation for
Jack
any
and
of that.
Claire were siblings. That was kind of crazy.
I think that was a season 1 reveal, maybe season 2, but that was like it was old Lost.
But the thing
Like,
is, they, like-
everything going to shit.
The reveal happens, and then nothing happens with it, and then at like the end of season 5, it comes up again. Like it's such a weird like.
It was weird.
They
weird.
completely drop the plot point, and then they're like, "Oh, actually, never mind. Like this is going to be an important plot point now."
yeah, like that.
Yeah,
was
well,
an
they did that a
interesting
lot.
choice.
Yeah.
Like they had, obviously I mentioned Locke's dad being the guy connected
Yeah.
to Sawyer, and Sawyer meeting Jack's dad, and there was a lot with Jack with dad. There was a lot of dad stuff.
There's a
in
lot of
this
dad stuff in this.
show. It was a theme for sure, but
The writers
yeah.
definitely have some dad issues.
I mean, all writers do. That's any show
Yeah,
you watch.
it's the thing.
The next episode we're going to do is The West Wing, and there's a lot of dad stuff in that. Guess what?
Yeah,
the next
for sure.
episode we're going to do after that is Ted Lasso. Is there a lot of dad stuff in that? Fuck yeah, there is.
Yeah, I don't think I have any other notes other than like from my research. I found out that like the numbers when you add them all together add the number of minutes that like it reset at. That was just like a silly little
Oh.
thing I didn't know.
Oh, cool.
108.
I didn't know that either. That's
Yeah, and also the numbers represented the like top candidates. Like when you see the writing on the wall and they have the numbers beside them, like 4 was Locke, 8 was Hugo, 15 was Sawyer, 16 was Saeed, 23 was Jack, and 42 was Quan. So like that
It's
was
'cause
also a
that was
fun
their-
fact.
That was the number of their seat on the plane, but also like why are they connected to so much other fantastical stuff? Why were they
Plane
on the
seats
hatch?
numbered that way?
Well, it was like the row that they were in and the number. Yeah, I don't know. I've
Don't
never
think
been on a
about it
plane.
too
I can't
deeply.
confirm.
But they're
Okay,
not,
okay.
right? Because isn't it like it's
The-
like
it's a-
letter and then number?
Yeah.
Your seat is a letter and then the number is a row.
Maybe
Yeah,
it was
that's
different
what
in
it is.
2004, okay?
Maybe.
Well, thank God none of them were in the same row then.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I have one miscellaneous note, and then I have some questions maybe for you guys. Unless Dan,
Okay.
you have other things that you want to get to.
I've gone through everything I prepared, so I'm just if you guys have
Okay.
any other things to bring up, go for it.
Let's do it. So here's my one miscellaneous note: the title screen. One of the worst things I've ever seen.
I don't remember it. I don't
Miguel,
remember it.
It's like imagine
nothing.
Microsoft Word art, like the word lost in like that big Microsoft Word art, and then it
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
like this. Ooh, spooky.
Oh, I do remember it now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dude,
yeah, yeah.
it's something we could actually put together right
I
now
could do it,
in
yeah.
about 5 minutes.
And they
It's-
did it all 6 seasons?
Yes, they never
the same,
fucking
yeah.
changed
And
it.
you don't know, remember the noise? It's like, ooh.
It's
Yeah.
so bad.
It
It's
sounds
so
familiar.
It's so stupid. I actually when it happened the first time, I was like, "There's no way this stays." I'm like, "This was like the intro to the show. Once it got a little bit of heat behind it, they definitely put more money into a title card." Fuck no! It is the same, and it is abysmal. It might be
Okay.
the worst TV show intro I've ever seen in my life.
But
like
it-
no joke.
But at least for the 24 episodes, we didn't have like a really long like title sequence. We had
I
to
was
skip
gonna
through
say-
every single episode.
But
Here's
you
a
can
hot
skip
take.
through them now.
Here's a hot take.
But imagine if
That's
you were
what I
watching it
was-
on DVD and you couldn't. People's lives would be ruined.
You just hit next chapter, bro. It's easy. It's no
Next
problem.
chapter.
Even-
Wait,
I don't know if it
they
would
never
count it as a
had like a
chapter.
they never had like a scene before the intro sequence, did they? Or was
Yeah.
was it just
Sometimes.
always
Or usually,
Oh, they
yeah.
did they?
Yeah,
oh,
they had
was it
cold
like
opens.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They had cold open. Oh,
Yeah.
Here's a
I
hot
thought
take
it was
for
a
me.
show that it just did the intro and then you just never have to think about it.
Even on shows with a good intro sequence, I'm usually skipping.
Yeah,
Like,
me
I
too.
see
Like
it
Game of
once,
Thrones is like top tier,
and
and
it's
I
fine.
I
But I
didn't,
feel
I
like-
didn't watch the
I
whole
feel
thing every
like
time.
there's such an art to. I agree. I don't like a long title sequence. I hate a long title sequence. But there are shows that like have quick, very good for the show. Like I'm been rewatching a lot, so I'm thinking about it right now. But Frasier, like Frasier's title sequence is also just the word Frasier over black. Like at the end of the day, that's all it is. And it's about the same length as the Lost title sequence. But there's like some artistry to it. There's like they do little fun things with it. The thing pops up. There's nice music in the background. Like there's just a level of like more than 5 minutes of attention went into it
Killing
That-
Eves is also really good. It's also just usually the title, but
Or even, I mean, guys, we're talking about TV shows. Breaking Bad. Like, that one is
Yeah,
also
that's
so
like-
short.
A
That one's
shining
iconic.
example.
It's perfect. Like, it's the perfect title sequence.
The song is just
Yeah.
It's so
you'll
good.
never forget it.
It's so good. It gets you in the mood for the show. That's the thing about a good title sequence is I feel like when it happens, you're like, nice, like another episode of the show. When the Lost one hit, every time I was like, fuck me. Like, it
And what
literally,
sucks-
that was my reaction every time.
What sucks is Disney Plus is so ass that when you try and skip it, it just takes the intro is so short that it actually takes
Yeah.
longer to load where it skips to than just
That's the
watching
thing.
the sequence.
So I never skipped it, and I just had to watch
It's on
it every
Disney
time.
Plus?
Yeah.
Disney
Yeah.
owns Lost?
They own
Well, they own
Fox.
Fox.
So
Oh, they
yeah,
own Fox,
it was on Fox.
right.
yeah, I don't know. There's so many ways they could have done it. I'm sad that they did it that way. Okay, I have a question for you guys. First question, and then this one's kind of a silly question, and then I have like 2 real questions. So here's the silly one, because we barely talked about Charlie, and I want to give Charlie some love, but Charlie is a part of a band named Driveshaft, and I just have to ask you guys, like, which actual emo English rock band do we think Driveshaft is supposed to be parodying?
Oh.
And I have some options for you, okay?
Thank
Option
you.
1, The Smiths. Option 2, The Cure. Or Option 3, Oasis. Now, here's the thing I'm going to say.
the brothers.
Charlie's brother, his name's Liam.
The brothers.
Oasis.
And he sings Wonderwall in one of the episodes when he's on the street. I would
I
say
also
Oasis for
thought,
sure.
when I saw him sing Wonderwall, I was like, confirmed. It's Oasis.
But also, of course, he was singing Wonderwall on the street.
Yeah.
Iconic guitar player behavior, just singing
Yeah.
Wonderwall given any opportunity. All right, here's the real question. We got to rank the intros, guys. What are we doing? What? Or not intros. We got to rank the seasons.
Oh, that's
Oh.
good.
Okay.
I have mine ready, so I will
Wait,
give you guys
before we
some
do
time.
that,
Why don't you
can we go
start?
through the season finales?
Yeah,
Because season
Yeah.
6 we know, whatever. Season 1 was
the raft.
Okay.
the raft, and
The
then
raft.
does Sawyer get shot for season 1, or is that season 2?
Season 1.
Right
yeah.
at season 1.
So he gets shot, he falls in the water, and
In
that's
the
like the end of the episode.
3-part season
Yeah.
finale.
yeah.
3?
And
Yes.
also, season 1 is where the season 1 finale, Danielle steals Claire's baby because she
Yeah.
thinks it'll get her daughter back, and they blow up the hatch for the first time. That's how it ends.
Season
What a stinger
season 1
for
is
the end of
Hatch?
the
I thought
finale.
season 2 was Hatch. Damn.
They get
season
into
2
it
is
in
Hatch, but they
season 2.
end season 1 with blowing it open.
Yeah, I
and
thought that
looking
was the end of
down.
season 2. And
No, that's
okay,
season
I'm
1.
I'm
No.
completely lost. Okay. Oh, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
You're
So- okay,
completely
so-
lost.
Nice, nice. I'm locked out. I can't believe how many fucking lock puns there were in the
Yeah.
episode names you were listing, Dan. God damn it.
It's
okay.
so easy.
So season 1, they open the hatch. I remember that's like
Yeah.
an iconic scene from the show for me. Like when they're looking down the hatch, like that was sick.
It's one of my favorite shots in the whole show.
Season 2, what happened?
Season 2 is the Walt and Michael thing. They storm the others to try and get Walt back, and the hatch blows up because the whole season Locke's like, we need to type in the numbers,
Right.
and then he has a change of heart with Desmond, and Desmond's like, this hatch is why your plane crashed. It can really emit serious energy here, and then like Locke's like, no, we're not going to do it, and Desmond turns the fail-safe key,
Yeah.
and like prevents the actual explosion with the minor like implosion or whatever, and that's also what gives him his powers.
Okay, so what was? Is there an explanation for all of that? Why they were typing
What,
the numbers?
the energy?
The energy thing?
No. Well,
Do we ever-
No.
It was
Not
to
why the
keep the,
numbers are what they are.
electromagnetism at bay.
Okay, but then it
Yeah.
stopped. They don't do those numbers anymore. So like
Whatever
yeah,
Desmond did by turning the key, which we don't see.
Why
Like,
didn't he just
I
turn
don't
the
know.
key?
I guess that's why.
Miguel, I went
Okay.
down that rabbit
You know
hole
what?
in my
Let's-
mind.
let's,
And
let's just not get into that.
yeah, it's
All
like
right.
Because it's risky. It's risky.
it's really.
Oh, my bad.
It was
I'm-
risky, Miguel.
He
okay?
didn't know exactly
There's
what
gonna be
would
a
happen.
6-page fan theory about why that
Yeah.
makes sense. I'll read later. Okay.
Oh,
see-
and also the season 2 finale is when Jack, Kate, and Sawyer get kidnapped.
Yeah, by the others.
so that's okay. So season 3 is like when we really meet the others.
The intro of season 3 is that reveal of them living in the little houses on the island. And then season 3 is it's where it should have ended. It's where the others are storming the beach and stuff, and they lead the team up to the radio tower, and the boat's on the shore, and they have a chance of escaping.
Right.
And that's when Charlie dies and stuff.
Season 3 finale
The Looking Glass.
is where he dies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then season 4 is them escaping, the Oceanic Six escaping.
The boat blows up, and you think Jin dies on the boat explosion as well. While the rest
Oh,
of them.
that was a crazy with a
Yeah.
giant like massive C4.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that wasn't that where Yeah, Michael died
dies.
there.
Michael dies there. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually dies.
Damn.
And then Jin doesn't actually die. And then season 5 is killing Jacob and also the bomb thing in the 1970s timeline. And obviously season 6.
Season 6.
Heaven.
The end of everything.
Okay.
Okay, so
that's tough.
are we ranking the whole seasons as
Yeah.
what, like, the season?
You have to
doing-
rank the seasons.
Are we doing each individual, or are we going to try to...
No, we'll just do individual. I feel like if we try and actually argue it out, it's going to take all day.
Well, Marco, you have yours prepared. So
I
do you
do,
wanna go first?
and I'm sorry, but it's gonna start a little controversial, and I hate to do this, but I'm weighing two. I as I talked about at the start of this, I have to weigh two thoughts in my head, right? And one is the actual quality of episodes overall, but the other thing that's important with TV shows is the pacing, right? And that like drive to keep watching the show. And so for me, even though I think overall the quality of the episodes is not as good, I'm actually putting season 4 at my number 1 spot. Purely because it pacing wise felt like the most modern out of all of them. The first 3 seasons, even though they have better stuff in them than season 4, I will 100% agree, were kind of a slog to get through at times because of the shit I didn't care about. Whereas season 4 didn't have any shit I didn't care about. Now, it also didn't have like the best stuff in the show, but it also did have really good stuff. It still had like the really great Desmond episodes. I would argue that the finale of season 4 is really solid with like Sun being separated from Jin. It kicks off that whole arc. So for me, it's like the perfect middle ground where it's like trimmed the fat from the first 3 seasons, but it doesn't have as much bullshit as the next 2 seasons. It's like really a transitional season. But it worked for me. It was like probably the most consistently I was able to just like watch a season and not have to take breaks. And then in succession, like right up next to it for the top spot are seasons 4, 2, 3, 1. I think season 2 outside of season 4 is the most consistent, and I love like the way the mystery progresses in season 2. That's everything to do with the hatched, all that stuff I thought was like really interesting. The character backstories I thought were like at their peak in that season as well. Season 3, Dan, I told you about this. Back half of season 3, exceptional. Like the second half of season 3, phenomenal. The first half of season 3, when they're captured by the others and having sex in cages and stuff, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna keep watching this fucking show. Like that was really bad. Season 1, then after that, season 1, solid introduction season, but just did not have the highs of like the good stuff in season 3 or so on. And then seasons 5 and 6, because 5 at least had the fun time travel stuff, and 6 is complete fucking nonsense. So 4, 2, 3, 1, 5, 6. That's my final rankings.
I know you love 4 a lot. I was shocked to hear that it was number 1.
It's my number 1.
I'll go next, I guess, if you guys don't mind. So first, I'm just going to say the order, and then I'll give a quick explanation. So mine is 2, 3, 1, 4, 5, 6. I think 2, with the hatch stuff, is my favorite content in the entire show. Season 3, like you said, Marco, I think it ends a bit stronger than it starts, but overall, I think it's a fantastic season. It has my favorite episode, like I mentioned, the season 3 finale, Through the Looking Glass. Season 1 is next because I think the way it starts with like introducing us to the structure of the show, all the characters that we grow to love, and that's where the mystique of the island was at its height. We knew next to nothing of the island at that point, and how all the characters dealt with that. Season 4, now I'm the ones I'm listing now, 4, 5, and 6 are just like the best of the worst. I think I agree with what you said, Marco, of how it feels the most modern, partly because it's by far the shortest season, and I like how it ends a lot. I'm not a huge fan of the whole, like the plot line of the entire season being these people were sent to assassinate Ben Linus, but it's not bad or anything, but better than 5 and 6. So 5 is next because it has some of my favorite episodes in this series, despite overall being kind of dumb and there's no rules to the time travel. But I love the LaFleur episode. I love the Locke death episode. The finale is interesting, even if the time travel rules don't make sense. It's still engaging. And then lastly 6, because they're like a small handful of shining moments, but it didn't land the way that it should have, and it hurts. So that's my number 6 spot.
I can go next. Mine's gonna be pretty quick. I think it's gonna be 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 is just on another level. Like the character episodes were amazing. You don't have any of that like intro stuff that like a first season has. Like the characters. You know, for the most part. I mean, I think they introduced the back half playing people in the second season, but Mr. Echo is Mr. Echo. He's sick. He's like the star of that season for me. But I mean just like that whole Hatch season was really, really cool. I mean, you have was it that season where Michael kills Libby and Ana Lucia?
Yeah, that's when
Okay,
Walt is
so that
kidnapped.
like I know some of that spills over to season 3, but I didn't really like season 3 that much. You know, the whole others versus plane crash people. It wasn't. I mean, I don't remember much of it. It wasn't really interesting to me. I mean, I know you were interested in a lot of new characters like Benjamin and stuff like that, revealing that he's like actually the leader and all that. But I don't know. It didn't do it that much for me. Season 4 had some really great moments. I'll agree. Like, there's some really good episodes in that season, but overall, I don't think it's on the same level as like the first couple seasons. And then 5 and 6 or 5 and 6. No explanation needed. I mean, there's some good episodes actually in 5 as well, but yeah, like it just got super confusing and hard to keep track of, and it's not like a overall season where you're like, oh, like, you know, this is what they were going for this season, and it's just like a mess, and some storylines get answered later and some don't, and individual episodes are great in some cases, but that's it.
Okay. I think this has made me realize that I find ranking things torturous. And I've already changed my answer 3 times while you were all giving your answers. But this is where it's at right now. Okay, so season 2 is number 1. That I didn't even have to think about. I agree. It was like...
It's peak.
Because I think it also took me so long to get into it, like, thinking back on it, just like I didn't enjoy season 1 that much. Like, there was a lot of intrigue, but I think when at least a handful of things kind of started to get explained is when I could finally like be in it properly. So season 2 is my number 1, and then it goes to season 5 and then season 3.
Wow.
And then season 4 and then season 1 and then season 6.
Whoa.
Wait, sorry, can you run that down again?
Whoa.
Can you just do the numbers again?
Second last.
So season 2, 5, 3, 4, 1, 6.
That's actually insane.
That's where I've ended up.
Carol, that might be...
Because
I lied about having the hottest take on this podcast. Anyway,
I have
continue.
explanations.
Yeah.
Please.
So it's because I'm just thinking about like when I was most like into the show. When I was sitting there like wanting answers on the edge of my seat, like watching like 5 episodes at a time.
That's true. Season 5 has a lot of questions.
That was
Yeah.
closer to the back half. And I think the amount that I hated the first half of season 3, like I had it in the number 2 spot, but I just was like, it was such a slog for me to get through that first half that it just like, the end was great, but I just don't know if it fully made up for how much I disliked the first half. So I had to push it down to the number 3 spot. So number 5 had to come up. Because I do love the time jumps. I love I kind of love the relationship building between Sawyer and Blondie, whatever her real name is. Like, I don't know.
Juliet.
Yeah, I loved that whole world. And that romance, because it also, for a moment, stopped the like love triangle that was really frustrating me by that point. And then, yeah, like I said, just because I had a really hard time getting into season 1, like, despite I can acknowledge now that I've watched it all, like, it is in theory a good season, just like my experience with it was very difficult. Like, it took me maybe like 4 months to get through it properly. I was like watching an episode at a time every like handful of weeks. Maybe if I sat down now, I'd like it better. And then, yeah, obviously 6 is in the last spot, just because like by the time I got there I was just like almost pissed off, being like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I was angry watching it, and so then that just left season 4 where it was, in the 4th spot.
Carol, listen, as someone else who has a hot take, I am gonna talk about this a little bit, because thinking about my watching experience, if I had to pick the 2 seasons that I like finished the most quickly, it would definitely be 4 and 5. For whatever reason, season 5 is watchable as hell. I don't know why. I also can't explain it, but it's a very watchable season. Because
I think it's just like I need to know what's going to happen, where we're going to go. Like, anything could happen in any episode.
Yeah, I think for me, just the stuff in it that's really stupid is what.
Yeah, like, I don't know that I liked where we went, but just like watching it, I was like,
but the watchability,
enraptured.
I feel you. Like, if you were to look at like my overall watch times and rank it by that, I think 4 and 5 would be the top 2, just because it was like Okay, we're in 1970. What the fuck is happening right now?
That's a hot take. Season 5, I'm trying to like think what happened. Wait, was the Constant season 5?
No, that's season 4.
Oh,
But in
damn.
season
What happened in
5,
season
we got
5?
the variable, which is not as good.
That's when we were literally
Yeah.
jumping all the time. Like there was half of them that were stuck in the 70s and the other half that were like
Yeah.
meeting Richard in the 1800s kind of vibe.
So you remember in season 4 you got the flash forwards to them being on the mainland. In season
Right.
5, the flashes are them on the mainland, but it's no longer a flash forward. It's like the present day.
Okay.
And then until they come to the island, and then that's why they had Sun and Sun and Lapidus not be in the 70s, is so that they could continue the flashes to a different time, because like they ran out of ideas for the flashbacks, and you couldn't do flash forwards anymore. So let's
Yeah.
have these characters be here so we can flash to them on the beach while the other people are in the 70s. So that's the structure of season 5.
I think the main problem I have with season 5 is that the main characters of that season were people I just did not really care about at that point. Like Sawyer and Juliet, like, oof.
Interesting.
Like, I don't know.
I feel like that's a
Ben,
hot take.
I
that-
love
that
Sawyer
was
and
really-
Juliet. They're my favorite couple.
Really?
Yeah.
That
They
was
were my
really
favorite
boring
couple
for me.
as well.
Oh, couple?
Yeah,
No, Sun and
yeah.
Jin. I mean,
Oh
come
wait,
on.
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
Go on.
Okay, yeah.
Sun and Jin
True.
notwithstanding,
But they
Like-
started as a couple.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
New
couple.
couple.
Yeah,
couple.
exactly.
Island couples. Okay, my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, did the nuke episode? I must have happened that season,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
it's the
Season
finale
5
of that
finale.
season.
That was the finale.
Yeah.
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 Oh, okay. Oh man, so they didn't have the reunion that season either. Wow. Okay, yeah,
Nope.
I cannot. Maybe I put season 6 above 5. Holy.
Oh wow.
That reunion episode was pretty good.
If you watch season 6 though, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it's one of
I'm
the
not
harder
going
seasons
to.
to watch.
It's the hardest one
fucking,
for me to watch.
It's painful. I will say
It is, yeah.
one more thing, Dan, that you reminded me about season 4 that I didn't mention about why it's my favorite is also because it's the first season where we get a change in the format for the flashbacks.
Yeah.
Because the whole
Right.
show was like the flashbacks. Season 4 is the season that does the flash forwards, and like having that change up again from a pacing perspective, I was also like, oh, that's fun. I didn't expect the show to do that, and then they like butcher it, like it goes to shit in season 5 and 6. But
Actually, that's also one of the reasons why I love the Looking Glass season 3 finale so much. Is that's the first time we get, like, the whole time we've been
Yeah.
seeing flashbacks, so we're assuming that it's another flashback, but nope. This time it's a flash forward, and I love the reveal at
It's
the
fun.
end of
Well-
like Jack and Kate meeting up, and like we have to go back and stuff.
Doesn't Desmond have like future visions
Yeah.
or whatever during that season
He has
too?
like
That's how he knows.
premonitions of people dying. Not exactly. It's not the same type as
He's
like
able
the
to
flash
stop them,
forwards we
yeah.
get.
Wasn't it
in
always
the show.
Charlie?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, not always. It was Claire
Often.
too when he rescued her. It
Oh,
was
okay.
usually Charlie. That's why I love their dynamic so much. Him and Charlie just go together so well.
I have one more question, but it's very much an end of the podcast question. So
Okay.
if we have anything else.
I was gonna get everyone to rate the show.
Well, we
Out of
do
10.
just
10.
have to say whether it's guilty or not guilty.
Well, yeah,
to
we're
finish
gonna do
off
Oh,
the
yeah.
the
fair.
verdict
bit.
because like
Was
That
that
was
the
going to be my
question
last
mark?
question. Yeah, it's
Well-
like, what is it?
Oh, of course
is it
you're
guilty?
gonna
Well, it's not-
Guilty, not,
it's not-
guilty, aka like, I guess, would you recommend it or not? Is fundamentally
Yeah.
like what that question comes down to.
Oh, recommend it or not? Yeah, I wouldn't recommend the show just because it's a big time investment for like for me a big thing is like if a show doesn't end well, it's almost not worth it unless there are like clear like storylines that could have been an end. In Lost, I don't agree that there was it should have ended at season 3. Like that if it ended at season 3, I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
not
know,
as
with how
season
it-
3 is.
Not at season 3,
That's
exactly.
not what I meant. Yeah.
There are shows that like decline quality, but you could be like, if you just watch up to this season, like The Wire, for example, you could watch the first 3 seasons. That's like a trilogy with that storyline. Yes, that some characters come back season 4 and onwards, but those first 3 seasons are like, you could just recommend those if you wanted to, and you wouldn't miss anything by not getting the next ones. This show you can't. You have to watch the whole thing, and on a whole, I wouldn't recommend it because it just doesn't end well. Like it'd be like me recommending a show that got canceled. I can't do that. Like even if the seasons were good, it's like you'll never know what happens. You'll never get a satisfying conclusion. So I can't recommend it on that sense.
I would say if okay, let me just get off the way. Like for like a general, like if somebody I met at like a party was like, "Oh, I was thinking about watching Lost. You just watched it recently." I would say, "Don't worry about it, my guy. Like watch." Here's what I would say. Actually, this is exactly what I would say. I would say, spoil the whole show for yourself. Start by watching like a YouTube recap, and if you're okay with the fucking bullshit that you're gonna get to, and you just want the like fun of the journey, sure. But like, if you watch a YouTube recap and you're like, no, like I could not live with myself with that being the ending, then just save your time. Like, don't let yourself get invested only to be. And then, that person would come find me again and be like, you recommended this piece of shit ending to me. And like, so no, not to a general person. I would say, I think, funny enough, like, because it's such like a transitional TV show in terms of the time it came out, like transitioning from like network TV to your more like prestige television, but it still has a lot of like network TV bullshit and tropes, but then it has stuff that's like not that. I think if you're in any way curious about like TV history, or in some sense like working in some type of film or TV environment, this is probably a legitimately very important show to watch, to like learn from the good and not repeat the bad. Like it's an example of both things. It's example of things done so right, and example of like how not to do other things. So I think it's like instructional. So like if you again, like if you're around that space, I do think it's something you should expose yourself to. But yeah, in terms of a general audience, I would say start with a YouTube recap, and if you want to have the fun of the characters along the way, then do that. But yeah, I'm not going to just full out say, yeah, go watch Lost.
The YouTube recap is 2 hours, by the way, so.
Yeah, I had to watch like multiple really short recaps because I did not have. Oh, nice. I think I'm in a similar boat to Marco, where I don't think I could ever just flat out be like, yes, of course you need to watch this to anyone. I think the caveat I would give is like, if you've seen like every other like current good show that exists and you just want like something crazy to watch, you know what I mean? Like if you're just bored,
literally nothing else,
and you've seen like all the latest Emmy nominated things, go for it, because it's a ride and you'll have an experience, and I think that is worthwhile. But yeah, I don't think I could ever just tell anyone, just, like simply because like quality like notwithstanding, like simply because of the length of the episodes in the seasons. Like if it was just 30-minute episodes, I think I would say yes, everyone watch it.
Yeah.
It was literally just because not only is it a full 24 episode season, but it's the almost full hour-long episodes. Just that time commitment makes it hard for me to be like, everyone has to see this.
Exactly.
If it was just shorter in any way, a few less episodes, slightly shorter runtime per episode, I would be telling everyone to watch this just for the craziness. But it's just the format it ended up being in, the length was just a lot.
Here's mine. So I would try to recommend the first half. I know we said you can't just stop at the first half because you won't get a full story. I would say if you have the willpower to be able to stop yourself and just watch everything good that is offered in seasons 1 to 3, you will experience some of the best character writing you've ever seen on a show. In that regard, I think it's very worth it to watch, but you would have to be a very strong person to stop yourself there and not be curious to go forward. So it's like you kind of have to judge if, like, I wouldn't be able to stop, but this is also my selection. I'm gonna watch this show again, like after I'm done watching like the shows I need to watch and a couple other ones that have been on my list. When I have time, I'm gonna watch the show again in full. And I would never just watch the first half because I can't leave it there. So make the judgment. If you're that type of person, then I guess I couldn't recommend it. But if you're strong enough and you want some excellent character development and a really intriguing plot, try and shoot for those first 3 seasons. They're overall pretty amazing.
Just to counter that, Dan, if you're gonna go into a show knowing you're not gonna watch the full thing, you're not going to invest as much into the characters, and you're not going to get as much out of it. Like, as someone who goes into the show, who's going to watch the full thing, knows they're going to watch the full thing, they're going to invest into the characters because they don't know what's going to happen, in theory. Like, you can hear from friends and stuff what they think of it. But if I know I'm not going to watch a show fully, it's like, why? Like, I'm going to be, like, shielded. I'm going to shield myself a little bit in terms of, like, getting too attached to a character because if I'm not going to watch the ending, see what happens to this character, like, why should I care about that character? Like you can observe it from an objective point, like, oh, this is a really good episode, this is a really good season, but you're not gonna get that like emotional fulfillment of.
Here's my one argument for that, and I was thinking about this when you were doing yours and talking about how you could objectively never recommend a show that either got canceled or has a bad finale. Recently, I watched Mindhunter, which is the David Fincher Netflix series, which was canceled for one reason or another. It's an amazing show. I knew that going in that it wouldn't have an ending, but I was still very invested. So I think it is kind of person to person thing. Not that you don't make a good point.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have to consider that for sure.
It depends on the show for me. Like for example, like Dexter, which was on around the same time, also had an awful ending. Maybe even worse than Lost. But the thing with Dexter is that each season is its own storyline. Like there's like a he's the protagonist, sort of. I mean, whatever. And then there's like an antagonist in each season, and it's like it all wraps up in one. Every season is like wrapped up. Like yes, some stuff continues, but they're all kind of self-contained. Not as much as like True Detective or something like that, but you can still I could recommend Dexter because you don't have to watch that final season because it's independent mostly from the other seasons.
With Mindhunter, that was kind of. It was kind of like that, but there was also a very interesting overarching plot that was never resolved, and like I still enjoyed what I saw, even though I never got the conclusion. They are talking about possibly, because there's been a rise in viewership for it, maybe it'll be finished one day, but I'm glad I watched it anyway, even if I never get the finale.
Yeah.
But you make good points for sure. Like,
I think
it's tough. Like The Last Man on Earth is a show I was watching.
Yeah.
I got canceled, and and it got canceled before the third season came out. And I'm like, I'm not watching the season.
Really?
I still haven't watched it. Yeah.
It was.
I heard the third season was good, but like I'm like, this is one big storyline. It's not like self-contained. It's not like, oh, you can just stop at season 2 because that's like the good stuff. Like it's one big story, and it's like I'm never gonna get the ending, and until that comes out, I'm not gonna watch the third season.
I also think
That's
one
how-
of the
I don't know.
things,
That's
like,
how I am though.
especially with Lost, this speaks to kind of what you're talking about, Miguel, as well, is like Lost is fundamentally a mystery show. So to tell someone to like invest themselves, be like, yeah, absolutely, you should like get involved in the mystery, but then also you will never have a resolution to the mystery is like, I think even it's like a bigger sin than just like any drama where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe there are certain character plot lines that don't wrap up or whatever, but to have like the entire show be like focused towards one thing makes it a lot harder to then drop off before you get answers to that one thing, right? Because like that's the entire driving energy behind the show.
That hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt. It's like it's the part that hurts the most.
The show,
the characters are so good. It's
it had
just
an
so
ending.
unfortunate that
It just wasn't satisfying. It's not the same as like Mindhunter, where that was a mystery too, and that just doesn't have an ending because it was canceled. At least there is a series finale. It'll most likely disappoint you, but But yeah, I would say if you're hungry for that, like to experience this ensemble of characters and their development, that is a major point of like consideration. I just can't not mention to someone asking if they should watch the show.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys a question. I'm sorry to drag on the conversation, but is there like an ending that you can think of that would have satisfied? Like I'm thinking of like if it's even possible for this show
we kind
to
of
have
talked about
ended in a like in a Breaking Bad level, like amazing.
It was never
gonna.
Well,
be that
I don't know. I don't want to say
well,
it was never, but like
not be
Breaking
like at
Bad.
the level of Breaking Bad. I mean, like be consistently good in its final season as it was in the seasons prior.
I think
like, couldn't have done that
if it wasn't six seasons. If, for example,
if
it was 3 or 4 seasons. Oh yeah, for sure. Like that needs to happen for it to be. That's like the first step. Slice off
episodes.
half the shorter in season and number of seasons, as we've talked about. Which, if this show was made today, it definitely would be. No show gets not no show, but like no prestige show has like 6 seasons anymore. That's not entirely true, but you know what I'm saying.
20+
I think
episodes too is crazy.
Yeah.
that would never happen. I think if we got a modified version of the climax in season 3 and also the Jack and Locke stuff that we get towards the end of the season, if they had sped that up a little bit, not necessarily rushed it, but like they could have done it better where they like the pipeline of that being quicker so that it could have ended in season 3 or 4. I think that would have been like the best version with little to no fat.
Wouldn't that take away from the character development having
Not
shorter
necessarily,
seasons?
because not every episode was about them, and there was a lot of like, if we took out all the filler episodes, we could have smushed a lot of things down into less seasons.
I think cut out like half the characters, right? You know what I mean? I mean, like Boone and Shannon that have like some episodes.
Nikki
about
and Paolo,
them, or,
like their little one-off episode.
Exactly. I think if you cut that down and then you just give the main characters. And the other thing I'll say, Dan, just building off your point, because I agree, is I think the biggest problem and why the ending was so unsatisfying is that the transition from season 3 to 4 and then kind of 4 and beyond, the show becomes like a plot heavy show. Like, I think in order to have a satisfying conclusion, and what seasons 1, 2, and 3 were kind of building towards is like, yeah, there is some plot element that explains them being on the island, but you could wrap up a lot of that mystery stuff just with like throwaway Dharma Initiative explanations. I think like what would have made it satisfying is to have like the character stuff be resolved in an interesting way. The problem is that as the show went on, they started introducing more and more plot dynamics. So like if you had the same plot that was introduced up until season 6, and that was the point I made about the ending with season 6, is like what else could they have done? Like, I don't understand. Like, the ending to season 6 it's not what we want, but at the same time, given all the plot elements that have been introduced, yeah, to that point, you were never going to have a satisfying conclusion. But I feel like if you just reduce the amount of plot elements that go into it, there you go. And you make it more character focused and do it that way, it could have been satisfying. So I agree with Dan. I think a condensed show and only introduce up to like the early Dharma Initiative stuff, explain away some of the plot elements with that, keep the island mystery less of a like magical conspiracy, make it just straight up like people versus nature, and there's also maybe like one mystery element on the island, and really have it be resolved with the character stuff. It would have been, you could have made it work. Like, maybe it wouldn't have been Breaking Bad, but it would have been less satisfying, I think.
Yeah.
Do we want to end it with someone, I don't remember who asked, but like a number rating out of 10 of what you would give it?
I want to say 8, but I shouldn't. 8 sounds like I would recommend the show, but I wouldn't recommend
Well, we know you wouldn't, so you can just go with your heart.
Yeah, it's between 7.5 and an 8. But I have to go with 8 just because of the peaks. Because there's 10 out of 10 moments in that show. There's also a lot of 5 and 6 out of 10 moments. I think 8 is yeah, pretty solid.
Honestly, that's higher than I thought you were going to give it, Meguel.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 7.
7?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm gonna go 6 out of 10. But I think in my mind it's because like I think about, okay, like if Breaking Bad's a 10, like I just recently watched a few shows that I would consider 8s. That would be like Queen's Gambit, I think is like an 8, very solid. What was that other one? Fall of the House of Usher. I think that's probably like an 8 or a 9. And I cannot in good conscience put Lost in that category. So it would be between 6 or 7, just because of like the network TV-ness of it all and that awful title card. I'm gonna give it a 6.
Oh my god.
So that's where
I think over time you're gonna forget some of that stuff and you'll think of it more fondly.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I know that's you remember the good
That's
stuff.
the key to it.
Yeah.
The key to
I would
Lost
say-
is just time.
Listen, time
Just
heals
forget
all
about
wounds.
Yeah, just forget about it.
I think I'm going to say 7.5 out of 10. A solid 7.5. Not a bad score. Again, this is my objective score for like an outsider being like, yeah, this show deserves probably like a 7.5. Now, again, this is a show that I've watched many times. I'm going to watch it again, flaws and all, and I will admit it's heavily flawed. But yeah, objectively 7.5 out of 10.
The man who
So.
came in here calling Lost guilty gave it a higher score.
I know.
Then everyone.
Yeah.
This is just like the Locke and
That's
Jack
crazy.
relationship on the show. Like we've learned from
crazy.
each other.
I think that only means it has to be not guilty as the judge. That has
Are
to be
we,
the
are we
verdict,
deciding a
right?
definitive not guilty or guilty? Or 100?
You rated it the highest.
Yeah, but we all didn't recommend it. How could
Yeah.
How could it be not guilty?
Okay, court's out. I don't know. I can't make this decision.
Thanks again for listening to the feature-length podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you liked this video or audio. Give us a rating and review if the platform you are listening on allows that. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes of the podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video, or follow the podcast on Spotify. If you want to connect with us directly, you can follow us on Instagram at featurelengthpodcast, or even send us an email at featurelengthpodcast@gmail.com. Catch you on the flip side.